Northern Ireland also expecting some quite widespread fog overnight. This cloud in the middle will provide some patchy outbreaks of drizzle in places, and that could cause some icy stretches where it's falling on frozen surfaces, because particularly in the east we are expecting another widespread frost to be developing here. But as we start off Sunday morning, there is going to be a noticeable west to east split in conditions. Whilst it certainly is going to be very chilly off towards the east, we've got some slightly milder air pushing into the west, so parts of Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland, temperatures actually starting on the positive side of the temperature scale. It certainly is, though, worth remembering that those fog patches will be around first thing in the morning, so if you are travelling, do remember to take care. They will slowly lift and clear as we head throughout the day, probably quickest in the northwest, because this is where we're going to start to see the winds picking up in strength later on in the day. Gales perhaps developing across the Outer Hebrides into the afternoon and evening as we see patchy outbreaks of rain moving in here. Generally a calmer day for England and Wales. That high pressure is still in charge, but it will provide some sunshine once the fog eventually does clear off. But temperatures struggling here for 5 degrees Celsius at best. But the mild air in the northwest is slowly going to push its way across more areas of the UK as we head over the next few days or so. So into the new working week, things are generally settling down for the most part. There will be some rain around at times, but certainly some sunny spells in there. But a noticeable shift in those temperatures, certainly by midweek, much more pleasant for many of us, I think. Bye-bye.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever. An incredible £50,000. That's tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this year. What would you spend it on? £50,000 could buy those treats you've always dreamed of having. And just one entry into the Great British Giveaway really could make £50,000 cash all yours. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Lauren, let's start with this, shall we? How children's TV may be harming, not helping young minds.
Yeah, so this is an article in the Express today, a big double-page spread as a result of some new research in a new book that's coming out by a child psychologist, saying that children's television, and I think perhaps more importantly, the way that children consume television and video product now is perhaps not as healthy for them as we would hope it would be. And there's quite some distance from children's television of the past, of the sort of the Bagpuss and Clangers and Ivor the Engine era. And I think what's interesting about this is particularly the how children's television is consumed angle, because children are now put in front of screens significantly more often than they were certainly when I think we were growing up. The content that they are consuming is not great for their brains and their learning and development, which Floella Benjamin of children's television fame is now leading a big crusade to say that some of this is really, really bad for children.
These days, they're not watching the TV that we all watched when we were growing up. They're not even watching GB News in the morning.
What are they thinking?
Would you believe it? But they are watching this absolute drivel all day long on YouTube, and because obviously all our TVs are now connected to the internet, or they're getting TikTok on their TV. It's not even, so they don't even necessarily have to have smartphones or iPads. They can just watch this stuff on TV, and it is rubbish. They are watching it and they're obsessed with it. Oh God, Skibbity Toilet or something. Have you heard of this?
No.
No? Well, you'll have viewers who have got who are parents of sort of 13-year-olds, and this Skibbity Toilet thing is, they're all obsessed with it, and this is a really annoying sort of theme tune or thing that they sing at you.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Over the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me for the next few hours, political commentator Claire Muldoon and also political commentator Andy Williams. Coming up, Rachel Reeves says there's no choice but to engage with China as she seeks to restart Britain's formal economic relationship with the nation. She's there with her begging bowl, leaving us all behind. So I'm asking, should Rachel Reeves actually be in China whilst the pound plummets? And the poll is live on the GBNews website. Head over there right now and vote. Then Nigel Farage will be speaking live from Reform UK's conference in about half an hour's time. We'll have that live view here. All of this comes as 10 Reform councillors have resigned in a bid to get Farage to stand down as the party leader. Who's going to take his place if that's the case? So later on in this programme, I will ask him directly after his talk at the North West Conference. And I'll bring you the latest on the story that has shamed the nation, the rape gang scandal. GB News' relentless reporter Charlie Peters joins me ahead of his documentary, which airs tonight at 8 o'clock. Then difficult conversations. Khadija Khan, a Pakistani activist who has accused Sir Keir Starmer of silencing the whole debate on grooming gangs. She'll be joining me in the studio live. It's a busy show, but before we get started, let's get your latest news with Will Hollis.
Nana, thank you. Breaking news for you in this hour. A migrant has died while trying to cross the Channel from France to the UK. More than 30 people were rescued after a boat got into difficulty overnight. The migrant from Syria was reportedly crushed by others on board a leaky dinghy. A government spokesperson who confirmed the death said the tragedy underlines the terrible dangers of small boat crossings. More on this as it comes into the newsroom. Reform UK party chairman Zia Youssef has vowed to tackle grooming gangs head-on if they win the next election. Speaking at the North West Party conference, he called once again for a national inquiry. The Health Secretary has warned the use of inflammatory language over grooming gangs risks vilifying entire communities. He also says he fears rhetoric could lead to atrocities similar to the Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand, which killed more than 50 people. Wes Streeting told The Guardian newspaper, "There are people in my community who have either Pakistani heritage or look different, who are now more fearful today than they were before."
Overall, this government's re-engagement with China already sets us on course to deliver up to £1 billion of value for the UK economy. This includes across our financial services, in which the UK is a global leader. Financial services are the engine which power prosperity and growth through deep and liquid capital markets. Our two countries share great pre-existing links in this area as the highlight of our bilateral economic relationship.
That was the Chancellor Rachel Reeves there talking about the new UK-China relationship. The British government's independent terrorism legislation reviewer says politicians need to take a step back and look at the bigger picture when it comes to stateless persons and the balance of national security. His comments come after Reform UK leader Nigel Farage said he'd been thoughtful when asked if the UK should consider bringing Shamima Begum back to the UK. This is what Farage has said. "I've never wanted to. I've instinctively never wanted to, but I'm now thoughtful. I'm thoughtful. I don't classify her as ISIS, but not an all-out ISIS killer. So she's sort of less. She is a lesser part of the equation." This comes after US President-elect Donald Trump's incoming counter-terror chief said that IS members in Syria should be allowed home. Reports have suggested Reform UK said that the UK government should consider allowing Begum, who left the country to join the Islamic State group in 2015, to return to the UK. But Nigel was forced to hit back at the reports, writing on social media, "I have never wanted to allow Shamima Begum back into Britain, as I literally say in this interview." In other news for you now, Los Angeles authorities have declared a local health emergency for the whole county due to poor air quality as fire and smoke has blanketed the area. 11 people have now died and over 10,000 homes and businesses have been destroyed. California's governor has called for an independent investigation into how critical fire hydrants ran out of water and became impaired. Temperatures dropped to minus 18.7 degrees in the UK's coldest January for 15 years last night. The Met Office says the temperature was recorded in the most northern region of the Highlands. It's the coldest January overnight temperature since 2010, when temperatures dropped below minus 15 several times across the UK. Much of the UK endured below freezing temperatures overnight, dropping to minus 11 in Shap and Cumbria, with Heathrow recording minus 5 degrees. Those are your latest headlines for now. I'll have more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon and welcome to GB News. We are Britain's news channel. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now coming up, Rachel Reeves says there's no choice but to engage with China as she seeks to restart Britain's formal economic relationship with the nation. Some may say that she's running away. Remember that song Bob Marley, you're running and running away, but you can't run away from yourself. Then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Rachel Reeves actually be in China whilst the pound is plummeting? The poll is live on the GB News website. Please head over there, vote now. Nigel Farage will be speaking live from Reform UK's conference in about half an hour. We will bring that to you live. All of this comes as 10 Reform councillors have resigned in a bid to get Nigel to stand down as the party's leader. But the question is, who would take his place? All of that is on the way. As ever, send me your thoughts, post your comments, gbnews.com/your say. So 7 minutes after 3 o'clock, Rachel Reeves says there's no choice but to engage with China. She seeks to restart our formal economic relationship with China. Now, the Chancellor says that the agreements reached with China today were worth £600 million to the UK over the next 5 years.
Overall, this government's re-engagement with China already sets us on course to deliver up to £1 billion of value for the UK economy. This includes across our financial services, in which the UK is a global leader. Financial services are the engine which power prosperity and growth through deep and liquid capital markets. Our two countries share great pre-existing links in this area as the highlight of our bilateral economic relationship.
But with teachers planning strike and also with the inflation-busting pay rises that they initially gave to train drivers and doctors, farmers protesting, more planned because of inheritance tax. Third private school of the week is closed because of that. Businesses are breaking under the weight of national insurance, business rates, minimum wage, etc., etc. Is this the right time for Rachel Reeves to be jetting off to China? Joining me now, Adam Cherry, GB News reporter. Adam,
hello.
What are you hearing? What are the murmurings? What are people saying about her going to China? Was this the right move?
Well, I mean, it is an interesting question, isn't it? Because on the one hand, yeah, all the factors you've mentioned, the pound being very weak, cost of borrowing up to, I think, a 27-year high, inflation now looking like it's going to remain quite sticky. You would think, OK, this is looking like a bit of a tinderbox. She should probably stay behind as the Chancellor. You know, let's not forget that the Governor of the Bank of England is also over there as well. So two of the most senior... There's three of them there, yeah. So the most senior financial authorities or figures in the country are out of the country whilst this is going on. So there is an argument that she must return and stabilise things. But then also, I spoke to Alice Denby on the channel earlier today, and she made the point that, well, if she leaves, it looks like they're panicking, and that might jitter the markets even more. So she's sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't, to be honest.
Well, to be honest, it looks like she's running away. I mean, that's the way I'm seeing it. A lot of people maybe seeing the same thing. I get that she does need to find growth, but I'm surprised she didn't do that first. Like, if it were me and I were running the economy, that is the first. I'd be making the negotiations and bringing in the growth before making all the cuts that they're making.
Well, this is the point. They're now in a very, very tricky spot. She's supposed to only have one financial statement every year, which is the budget, which, of course, we had in the autumn, we had at the end of October. There are some murmurs that perhaps, given that all her fiscal headroom is being wiped out as we speak, she might have to implement some spending cuts. Don't forget, we have the spending review next year, and, well, no, now this year, actually, in the summer. Maybe we need to have an emergency budget in March to implement some spending cuts. Now, you know, what choice does she have? If the situation is the same by the time we get to March or June, you either cut you either cut spending or you raise taxes. Both are equally wildly unpopular. Obviously, the spending will be deeply unpopular with the cabinet and her own backbenchers, and many of their voters who will say we didn't vote for this. But then equally, some of those voters will say we didn't vote for more tax rises either. That wasn't in the manifesto, and it's also not something that you were promising after the budget we just had. So it is very tricky either way you look at it. Going to China, you know, there are some suggestions. Look, Keir Starmer has also been out of the country quite a lot, and now she's away as well. Are they ever here? Are they ever
Well, he's going off somewhere else again.
He's going to Ukraine soon.
To potentially give our British troops there to the Ukrainians to help with the peace deal. Now, again, we can't afford that.
Yeah, well, either way, I mean, Ukraine, we can part that for a second and talk about the politics of that later, but in terms of the optics of just never being here, it is creating this impression. We've heard this never here, Keir stuff, and they will, you know, the government will say it's important to build these international relationships and return to the world stage. Fine, but also, you know, look at what's happening domestically. I think some voters are getting a little bit frustrated.
The problem with Keir is his name rhymes with too many things. Too dear, never here.
The sketch writers really have a field day with this, don't they? Yeah.
Now, you talked about them saying that they're going to make cuts. So the first axe they're talking about is cutting billions from the disability benefits. Now, to me, again, I'll just give my opinion that I don't think that's where I would have gone. I would have looked at the civil service, the overblown civil service that blew literally doubled the size during COVID, and I'd be looking to make cuts there. Why have they gone for people who are potentially disabled?
Well, I suppose they're trying to balance. It's the same with the Winds Fuel Allowance, isn't it? Looking strong and decisive, and also, I suppose, compassionate for the people who really need help. But I understand it's not easy, but some of these choices are obviously not just consequential, but deeply unpopular. And if you're not producing the results soon, it doesn't feel like they are. They've been in government for 6 months now. You're going to pay the price very, very soon, I would suggest.
Well, but I keep hearing those with the broadest shoulders would carry the heaviest burden, fixing the foundations, and I mean, the same things that they keep coming out with, yet everything I'm seeing is the very opposite. Fixing the foundations, the foundations are crumbling. Those with the broadest shoulders are not the pensioners, and they're certainly not people who are
I mean, if you look at
benefits.
The spending review will be really telling on this, because you'll see where this is really coming in. I think most departments across Whitehall are being asked to make real-term savings, or cuts of at least a couple of %. You know, you could cut civil service headcounts. There was some suggestion of that. There was a pledge to do that by the previous government. I think that was actually scrapped. I think it's around 60,000 jobs, not 100% on that figure, but a significant number. That seems to have fallen by the wayside. So this will bubble up again, as I say, during the spending review, and indeed if we end up with an emergency budget, which would, I think, seriously damage Reeves's credibility, even more than some might argue it already has, because it rose back on yet another one of her fundamental pledges, stability, one financial statement a year. It doesn't look good.
Well, she said she wasn't going to come back for more, and it looks like she may end up breaking a manifesto promise not to raise income tax, which I think they should have done that to begin with. She shouldn't have boxed herself in a corner. But
they were boxed in, because
by their own making.
And I think that's why you saw the national insurance rise on employers, because they needed to get
only private employers as well, not the public.
They needed a huge cash injection quickly in their mind, and 25 billion for raising national insurance on employers was the quickest way to do it. But also, immediately you see it's squeezing jobs in the private sector.
It's the very opposite of growth. Adam Cherry, thank you very much. 14 minutes after 3 o'clock, Downing Street is reportedly preparing for billions of pounds worth of cuts to disability benefits in an attempt to calm the markets over its economic plan. Let's bring in Lord Kevin Shinkwin, who is a disability rights campaigner. Kevin, thank you very much for joining me. I am surprised that Labour would look at this, seeing as when the Conservatives suggested it, Labour were dead set against this. Where are you on this prospect of them cutting disability benefits?
No, I think it's essential that we look at the big picture, and the big picture is the Chancellor is in Beijing, cozying up to a regime that's a threat to our country militarily and is committing genocide against its Muslim population in Xinjiang province. It's not a good look. On the disability benefits question, I think the big picture is, can the welfare state be sustainable if we continue to see an exponential rise in disability benefit growth?
And what do you think? Because, OK, so it sounds like you are in favour of them doing this as long as they are cutting the benefits from people who potentially don't really need them. How do you work that out, though? How can they work it out?
Sure. My starting point is simply this. Who are the biggest losers if the welfare state, which isn't permanent, much as we'd like to think it is, collapses because it runs out of money? And at the moment, that's what we're on course to do. So what I would say is it needs to be very targeted, but the efforts to help people realise their potential and get into work, progress in work, should be targeted as well.
But in a way, she's done the very opposite, though, because by raising employers' national insurance, employers won't want to employ more people, whether they're disabled or not. They will just look at that and think it is an extra cost. So all of these things, ultimately, they're meant to be progressive, but on the other side, they're regressive. In your view, do you think that a lot of people take advantage of the benefits, the disability benefits that are available?
Well, firstly, I think you're absolutely right. We are talking about a jobs tax. We are talking, through the national insurance contribution increase for employers, about disincentives to employ, disincentives to promote and to increase pay. That's logical. Everyone can see that apart from the Chancellor. In terms of people taking advantage of the system, I think that's natural. We're all human beings and some people will do that. But I go back to my point that they need to be encouraged and supported to get into work. And when they have, for example, come out of work, maybe mental health issues, depression, to get back into work within the first 6 months, because experience and research in Holland has shown that that is the crucial point at which people leave the workforce.
Because I think that most people with a disability who are of working age and who can work, want to work and will work. So I agree to, you know, work out a proper criteria where anyone who's taking advantage of the system should be removed from their ability, you know, from the list of benefit claimants. But is this really, will this really take a significant chunk out of what the Chancellor needs to recoup? Or do you think that perhaps she's just really ultimately looking in the wrong direction?
I think the priority today must be to reassure the markets. Our national debt interest is growing out of control and putting a price on the heads of all our public sector workers, nurses, doctors, police officers, firefighters. We've got to ensure the market has confidence in the government.
And finally, yes or no, was she right then, Rachel Reeves, to go to China now at this point?
No, I don't think she was. I think there are huge issues of her own making that she's got to address in coming home, and I hope she does so.
We all do, but, you know, they're quite good at even evading interview. Thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. That is Kevin Shinkwin. He's a disability rights campaigner. Really good to speak to you. If you just tuned in, welcome. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, Nigel Farage will be live. We'll be listening to his speech at the Reform UK conference. But next, it's time for my Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should Rachel Reeves be in China whilst the pound plummets? This is GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
We've got a special treat for you because we can show you this lovely video of a lady running on a beach. So you're not missing much if you're listening on the radio. It is literally a woman in white writing on the beach, writing 2025.
Yes, because that's the year we're in now.
Is it?
Yes,
Wow.
and it's because Meghan Markle returned to Instagram yesterday.
Former world correspondent for The Sun, Charles Ray, joins us now. Are you inspired to remember the year, Charles?
Oh, Happy New Year to you too, as well. I honestly haven't got a clue what she's doing now. You know, I would have thought we should have had the theme tune from Jaws as she was running down to the water there and everything else. They're being quite hypocritical here because they came off social media because they were getting unparalleled abuse. I don't condone at all. It is not right whatsoever. And they've spent the last few years complaining about social media.
We've seen her before with her lifestyle blog, haven't we? Before she met Prince Harry, she was running a successful blog. Do you think she wants to go back to doing that sort of thing?
I think it's possible that that's what she wants to do. I mean, I don't understand how these things work, okay? But all I know is that certain influencers earn an awful lot of money from Instagram and everything else. Now, they're talking about figures. I mean, whether this is true or not, I have something like £790,000 she could earn per post. You know, so it's quite incredible what she could possibly earn out of this. It's interesting, though, Stephen and Ellie, that she's actually switched off all the comments on this one.
I noticed that.
Clearly, she doesn't want to have anybody on there saying anything nasty or anything good about it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
21 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. I'm Nana Akua. Don't forget as well, you can stream the show live on YouTube, or why not download the GB News app. You can watch all the programmes at your leisure. But it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should Rachel Reeves be in China whilst the pound plummets? The Chancellor is facing criticism for her decision to travel to China from across the political spectrum as the cost of borrowing rose to its highest level in 9 months. Honestly, seriously, a lot of people saying, oh, it's not all her fault. We can't. I'm afraid she has to take some responsibility for it. Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride said that Rachel Reeves should focus on this country instead. And whilst the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, agreed, adding to the Chancellor should urgently come back before the House of Commons is set out a real plan for growth. Or is that a bit unfair? Is she in China looking for growth? Perhaps she should have found the growth before she gave us all these policies, but what do you think? So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Rachel Reeves be in China whilst the pound plummets? Well, joining me now, political commentators Claire Muldoon and also Andy Williams. Claire will no. For some reason or other, I couldn't get to the no. Claire,
yes,
what
Nana.
do you think? Great to have you on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Me.
Thank you.
Right, what do you think? Is Rachel wrong to go now?
Right, Rachel Reeves has got a lot of issues, I think, to deal with domestically that clearly she's not dealing with. Clearly, this you just don't hop on a plane and go to China for talks. They were clearly managed and promoted, and indeed planned before, a long time before. The pound is plummeting, and the rise of our government borrowing has increased further than any other country. And I think she's got. If it was me, I think I would have exercised some judgment and stayed at home and treated the domestic ability with fiscal planning far better than she's actually doing. My message to her is, although she keeps saying growth's the #1 thing for this country, well, she's not letting things grow. Look at the track record. Increase in national insurance contributions for employers. The employees benefit starting from Angela Rayner when they come into new jobs. They've got everything up-fronted in their side more than employers have. She seems to be stifling growth. She seems to be stifling businesses. She seems to be stifling a lot of industry and a lot of entrepreneurship. I don't think she's going to get that in China. And she's going to the lead manufacturer of the Brompton bikes. I thought Brompton bikes were made in the UK. Apparently not.
Well, we don't make anything, Claire. This is what concerns me. They are already on their soapbox to tell us how evil and wicked the Chinese are in terms of their treatment of people in China and
the Uyghurs for a start,
Muslims and all this stuff. And China are building, I think it's 4 coal-powered stations a day. So of course they can supply the world. Why are we going there? We should be doing those things here. But what do you think, Andy?
Well, firstly, I mean, I think we have to be pragmatic about China. There are human rights issues, which you've mentioned. It's a completely different system, a completely different way of looking at the world. But they are the second biggest economy in the world. They're going to be the biggest economy in the world in fairly short order. And I think it is important.
But that's partly our fault. Well, because we can now offset our carbon. This is what I don't get with this government. We're going to offset our carbon. So China are going to manufacture everything using their coal power stations. We've closed ours down, and then they'll be the largest economy in the world. We're beggars.
If we look at something like manufacturing, we have to be honest and realistic about the fact that we're not going to be able to compete in terms of cost. And by, rebuilding a huge manufacturing sector in this country, I'm afraid it's just not realistic. We're not going to be able to.
Why is that not realistic?
Because goods can be manufactured in China for a fraction of the cost.
For now, until they've got you by the short and curly. And then the next thing you know, those prices go up, and then you are at the mercy of them. And that was the problem with what happened with Vladimir Putin and Ukraine and the whole world, because we were all in bed with Russia.
And I think we need to be building a diversified economy that has some element of manufacturing in it. I think there is a huge risk to the economy we've created in Britain in the last 30 to 40 years, which is entirely built on financial services, let's be honest.
And you cannot
as we saw in 2008, it's too risky. If there is a big financial crisis, we are in a much more vulnerable position than the average economy. So I do think there's stuff to do there. In terms of Rachel Reeves going to China, economies are built on confidence, and actually one of the biggest challenges we've seen with the Labour government so far is that the excellent relationship they built with business in the run-up to the election, and trust me, business were absolutely crying out for a change of government pre the election, but that confidence has been lost largely as a result of the increase in employer national insurance, which went down like a cup of cold sick.
And the business rates, because it's the things all together, isn't it? So you raise national insurance for private business, not the public sector.
Correct.
And then you raise business rates, and then you raise the minimum wage. And then Angela Rayner comes along and says, oh, well, no, you have to keep your employee from the very start, and they have rights at the very, very beginning. So not even a trial period. Suddenly the employer goes, I don't think I want to employ anybody else.
And we've heard anecdotally, but we've also seen early data that says employers are either not hiring or cutting staff, and that is a massive problem.
Which
and
they
I
are.
say, no, I know they are.
But that's created by Rachel herself.
And as a Labour supporter and a Labour voter, I think that has been the biggest mistake Labour have made so far. But should she have gone to China? Yes, because confidence is key. And by not going, she would have created more panic in the markets and more panic for business. And I think she has to carry on and just pursue the strategy and see it through.
Why? Why? If a strategy that you're pursuing is causing disaster, why would you need to see it through? You change course.
I've just written down one word here and saying sinister. And it's completely sinister that she's actually doubling down on her policy, and every message that's sent out from number 10 and number 11, they are doubling down on their messages. That shows me actually that they're unconfident on what they're actually trying to do. And for me, that's sinister. And I would far rather they actually took a breath, took a step back, took a bit of a temperature test on public opinion and rolled back and changed some of the awful, awful decisions they have made.
Well, I think there are definitely aspects...
And that's the strength.
I agree with that. And I don't think that... When I said pursuing the strategy, I'm talking about the aspect of her being in China. That is about pursuing inward investment, which
Andy, Davos is coming up.
Davos is coming up.
She can meet the Chinese there. She can meet anyone she wants there. Davos, for me, is very sinister in any event, and I think it should be stopped. However, that is a way of the World Economic Forum. Everyone else is attached to that, and that's incredibly difficult and very, very powerful thing for anyone to manage the discourse from that.
But if Rachel Reeves was sitting at her desk in the Treasury this afternoon...
I wish she was, with a calculator and with an advisor.
But hang on. And all the other civil servants who could come back to the office as well.
But there is nothing she can do today to change the way that the bonds markets are responding. This is all about... This is all about the overarching strategy, and it's about confidence. And I think, I absolutely think there are aspects of what Labour have done so far that they need to look again at. And another mistake I think she has made is that she has said categorically there will be no more tax rises, and we know that it's highly likely that there will be, and if there aren't, we're going to have to see even deeper spending cuts.
So that's
than have been planned. That is a massive
she should
problem
be sitting at her desk. She should be at home at number 11, sitting at her desk, working things out, taking advice from people instead of doubling down, flying off to China, and actually putting Britain on the map, and Britain and the electorate first and foremost. Andy, it's not.
That is putting Britain on the map.
She's on a jolly. She's escaping.
It's not. No. Come on. Let's be clear.
This is not for duty free.
It's not.
Yes, she is.
This is not a jolly. I'm sure Rachel.
Any discounts in the UK when you come back?
I'm sure she'd much prefer to be here cracking on, but
she would not.
It's really important that, and Keir Starmer's got stick for being on planes and flying all around the world and meeting world leaders, but actually our image as Britain has suffered badly over the last 15 years.
4 months over the last 5
partly,
months.
Well, no. Partly because of Brexit, partly because of all
Andy, don't mention Brexit.
Partly because of the instability in terms of changes in... That is a part of the story. And another part of the story is the churn of prime ministers, which affected our credibility globally. And what Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are trying to do is rebuild strong relationships with France, with Germany, with China, and yes, with the United States. Look at the pragmatic
Germany
approach.
And everyone else aren't interested in Britain.
Yes, of course.
No, they're not.
Can I just say, France and Germany are shrinking economies.
Yes.
OK,
but they're still major...
Everyone wants to tie themselves up in knots right next door to the EU. The EU is a shrinking bloc. She may be right to go to China, but let's talk about the timing of her going as well, especially with Donald Trump coming in. And the Trump administration have already showed that they're quite favourable towards the UK. How will it look? How do the optics look for us going straight to China first? Before Davos, she could wait.
Well, Trump's not going to be president for another 9 days, so I'm sure there will be...
She could wait, that's the point.
No.
The Americans won't like that look.
But it's not either
Doesn't she want to deal with them?
We can't throw our hat all in with the US. We have to build a strong relationship with the US.
Anyone is.
It's not all in. I'm just saying.
And
that
interestingly, she didn't take Miliband on this trip, did she? Miliband, the big net zero, and who's the biggest contributor to global warming or global change? China.
Well, as I understand it, she's taken quite a few of the CEOs of the major banks, and I think that's the right thing to do.
She's taken 2 others: the governor of the Bank of England and somebody else.
Oh, the governor of the Bank of England. Come on, whoa.
Somebody's gone with her. 2 other people. But look, this is the thing, right? It doesn't look good to those who are quite favourable towards us, like the United States at the moment. When Donald Trump, he's already expressed how much he likes the United Kingdom. She's gone off there first. I don't know why they appear to want to kind of create anger with the US. In my view, they could have gone to the US first, but I also think that she should really stay here.
Or China could have come here.
Well, she can at least fix some of the problems here, because this is not good. She's going there with a big
It's all about optic. At this critical time in this governance, I would say it's about optic. And the electorate want trust. They want a sinew of optimism. They're not getting it. They're going after disability claimants now. The winter fuel allowance has gone. As we mentioned about the increase in national insurance contributions from employers, apart from in the public sector. We've got teachers now, will we go on strike? ASLEF, again, going back on strike. It is an absolute nightmare. And yes, I do think we're going back to the 1970s. The 1970s was great for one thing. I was born. But then latterly, the winter of discontent. So about you.
Exactly.
There we are.
Look, this is the problem that I have, and I see that some people think it's a good thing that she's going away, and I get that. It is good when a leader...
Timing.
Well, it's good when a chancellor is going away to make relationships with lots of different people. I agree with that. But I think it's the timing of this that really annoys and irritates the hell out of me.
I think, had she U-turned...
No, I'm sorry, I've not finished. That's what irritates me, the fact that she is going there when she has made such a mess in this country. Look, the third private school now this week is shutting because of the VAT. Yeah? How can that... That's in a week. That's not good.
Look, it's not good, and I'm not suggesting that everything is going swimmingly, but on this specific issue,
Nothing is going well.
I think, well... And I know people are going to groan at this, but it's absolutely true. Look at the absolute mess that Labour inherited in terms of every aspect of the economy, of public services being... No, but it's true.
OK,
it's true.
so the economy was increasing by... I think it was 0.7. OK, so it was 0.6 the month before, so in June. In July, it was up to 0.7. It is now 0.0. So that is in a few months that they've been... They cannot absolve themselves of all responsibility. I'm
not saying they can.
The lack of confidence in this country and the falling growth rate of their policies.
I agree with that, and I agree that there has been...
You just said they inherited an economy... They did. And I've just told you, but they inherited a growing economy. A growing economy.
And I'm afraid that this is a situation... They haven't destroyed it.
They have.
No, they haven't.
We are heading for recession.
Sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. And the problems...
Andy,
but listen, the problems in this country are so deep, are so entrenched, and are so complicated, and require so much money to resolve that it is going to take years and years to fix things.
They've come in and said, we're going to have a reform bill for this, that and the next thing. We want reports on X, Y and Z. Funny how they don't want a report on the rape gangs, isn't it?
No, that's interesting. And they were very quick to arrest or charge the person who wrote an awful tweet about Jess Phillips, but yet somehow the perpetrators of some of these rape gangs and all the whole sort of intricate network, they're not interested in having a look at. And I think it's a bit of a double standard. But what do you think? GBNews.com/you'll say we'll read some of those. This is GB News. We are moments away from hearing from Nigel Farage. He's at the Reform UK conference. I'll bring you that as it happens.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather updates provided by the Met Office. It's quite a misty weekend out there for some of us. Some freezing fog patches lingering in places. Because we've got high pressure in charge across much of the UK today, and that is providing light winds and therefore very good conditions for those fog patches to just persist right throughout the day. Even into this forthcoming night, they will start to reform, become denser, particularly through the Vale of York down towards East Anglia. Northern Ireland also expecting some quite widespread fog overnight. This cloud in the middle will provide some patchy outbreaks of drizzle in places, and that could cause some icy stretches where it's falling on frozen surfaces, because particularly in the east, we are expecting another widespread frost to be developing here. But as we start off Sunday morning, there is going to be a noticeable west to east split in conditions. Whilst it certainly is going to be very chilly off towards the east, we've got some slightly milder air pushing into the west, so parts of Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland, temperatures actually starting on the positive side of the temperature scale. It certainly is, though, worth remembering that those fog patches will be around first thing in the morning, so if you are travelling, do remember to take care. They will slowly lift and clear as we head throughout the day, probably quickest in the northwest, because this is where we're going to start to see the winds picking up in strength later on in the day. Gales perhaps developing across the Outer Hebrides into the afternoon and evening as we see patchy outbreaks of rain moving in here. Generally a calmer day for England and Wales, that high pressure still in charge, but it will provide some sunshine once the fog eventually does clear off. But temperatures struggling here for 5 degrees Celsius at best. But the mild air in the northwest is slowly going to push its way across more areas of the UK as we head over the next few days or so. So into the new working week, things are generally settling down for the most part. There will be some rain around at times, but certainly some sunny spells in there. But a noticeable shift in those temperatures, certainly by midweek, much more pleasant for many of us, I think. Bye-bye.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
Good afternoon, 39 minutes after 3 o'clock. Welcome back. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, we are minutes away from hearing from Nigel Farage. He's live at the Reform UK North West England conference. I'll bring you that as soon as it comes. In the meantime, a group of 10 Reform councillors have resigned in a bid to get Nigel Farage to step down as the right-wing party's leader. Now, the councillors, all of whom are from the Derbyshire region, which is considered key for Reform's electoral expansion, said that the party's current management is either incompetent or malevolent and slammed Nigel Farage for his autocratic manner. And all of this comes less than a week after tech mogul Elon Musk demanded that Farage leave his post, arguing that he doesn't have what it takes to lead the party. So joining me now, political commentators Claire Muldoon and Andy Williams. Andy Williams, well, this is a bit of a shock, isn't it? I mean, last week it was from my interview with Nigel. I think Elon overheard and then he got a bit annoyed. But then, you know, I think it's fair enough to have differing opinions. But do you think that Elon is right and that Nigel doesn't have what it takes to lead Reform?
No, I mean, I hold no candle for Reform whatsoever, but Nigel Farage is clearly Reform's biggest asset. I mean, I really think Reform is the Nigel Farage party. I believe that the 4 million or so people who voted for Reform at the general election, the vast majority of them, it was a personal vote for Nigel Farage. And I think without him, they would be lost. I really, really do. I do not understand what Reform has to offer people apart from Farage. I think if you look at their parliamentary party of 5 beyond Farage, it's actually an incredibly weak group of people, quite a low-calibre group of people.
Well, hold on a minute. Why are they weak? What is weak about?
Weak in terms of their quality and their calibre and their quality of thinking as policymakers.
Weak, and he's not very.
I don't think Lee Anderson, elected by his constituents, fine. That's their decision. That's democracy. I don't think he has a great deal to offer on the national stage from a policy standpoint, and I don't believe
but he's somebody who's actually unlike someone, say, like Rachel Reeves and quite a few of the others there on the front bench, he's a proper, true kind of grassroots, real working class person who has really, you know, and a lot of these overprivileged politicians don't get what it's like in the real world. Well, in terms of business as well. Rupert Lowe, they've all run businesses, as has Nigel. None of the...
Rupert Lowe ran Southampton Football Club, who I support, so I have a particular beef with him, but that's a whole different story. Lee Anderson... If he is a good constituency MP, which he may well be, absolutely.
Again, even despite what party he's
They did, and absolutely, we need grassroots, working class, salt-of-the-earth people who get their communities. Yeah. That is not the same as being an excellent national figure. And my point is that Nigel Farage, absolutely, I think, is the right person to lead Reform. And I think without him, I do not see a significant future for Reform in terms of their ambitions to go from being a party of 5 MPs to 50 and 100.
Well, they've got 180,000 subscribers so far, beating the Conservative Party. What do you think, Claire?
Well, I think Reform are very low and very under in policy. and manifesto, and I think that as their only asset, their greatest asset, is indeed Nigel Farage.
Absolutely.
And he has been asked and questioned time and time again for the minutiae, for the detail of a reform manifesto that will stop the boats, that will help the economy, that will help every single member of the electorate in Great Britain that's voted for them. I've yet to hear a thing that they will actually do. And you mentioned Lee Anderson.
Hold on a minute. Where there's a will, there's a way, though. At least they are willing to do it. As far as I can see, a lot of the other parties speak a lot of with their ideals when they're actually in power. Look at them. We've had the Conservative Party who did nothing. In fact, they are the arbiters of this disaster.
Yes, they are.
And you've got the Labour Party who
just don't have a clue what they're doing.
Immediately, foolishly, because they could have left it to the Conservative Party and blamed the Conservative Party, but used it anyway, so they could have had it to see whether it worked, but they didn't give it a chance.
But you see, what Farage is great at is advertising Farage. It's almost like the Farage party. And if it weren't for him, reform would not be anywhere than they actually are. And I think there's a danger, especially in the red wall. They're not going to go back to blue. They're going to go to reform blue, not conservative blue. And then we're going to have people... I mean, the discourse in this country at the moment is horrific. Everyone, and I've spoken before about this, before Christmas, it was right-wing. How on earth can everyone be disparaged as being right-wing if you agree with X, Y or Z? Exactly.
Keir Starmer keeps
but with a right-wing, you have to have a left-wing, and yet that's not been mentioned. The parameters at the moment are being completely blurred. There is no political party out there at the moment, I think, that can actually deliver what we want. We're too divided, far too divided.
OK, so if there's no party, I mean... I would suggest that if you are, say, a party like Reform, they are building their base and doing what they need to do to become a credible sort of and a real contender.
But look what's happening. They've got councillors resigning. They've got Ben Habib resigned. They've got a lot of people leaving. And Elon Musk, I'm sorry, but he needs to park his comments and leave them firmly at the door of Twitter or X.
Absolutely. Why?
He really does.
Why should
because he should not be getting involved in British politics.
Why not? He's just
because
a normal
he's got
person,
a lot. He's not
just
normal.
like everybody else.
He's not
no, but
normal.
what I'm saying is, you don't know, you've never met him, but in my view...
In terms of his...
let me finish.
The amount of money he's got.
He is allowed to make comments just like anybody else, is my point. He is equal to everybody else when he's on, even though he runs and owns X and all that. Other people could make the same comment on X, and so... could he?
He's got a massive platform.
Yes, but they have all said ridiculous things, all of them, on their big platform.
He's allowed to, absolutely, and I don't think any of us disagree that he should be allowed to say those things.
Free
that
speech.
doesn't mean that we also have the right not to take him seriously.
Of course.
And I think I'm concerned about the extent to which people are taking his comments on things like grooming gangs, which he alighted on 2 weeks ago. I mean, he's never spoken about it before in his life.
So what? Well, haven't you put something on Twitter that you've never spoken about?
Oh, almost certainly.
Exactly.
But I'm not the richest man in the world, and I don't have the influence that he has, and so it's different.
Yeah.
And he knows that he has substantial influence, and he has, you know, to be fair to him, the grooming gang story, for example, has risen up the agenda directly as a result of what...
What's wrong with him highlighting that?
Because he's intervening and talking about something that he doesn't truly understand for his own political ends.
Lots of people don't fully understand it, but he's highlighting something that is happening and has happened in the UK, and it hasn't had the right attention. He has used his platform for a good thing, and you're complaining.
Well, look, my view is that his ends are not particularly desirable.
So what? At the end of the day, he's highlighted... Look, you could say that about all of the politicians who do stuff and say things just to promote themselves. But at the end of the day, he has highlighted the scandals that Keir Starmer does not want, and his party have all voted against having a national inquiry. But stay with us, because Nigel Farage is live. Let's cross over to his North West Reform UK conference.
You've just heard Elizabeth's story in this room this afternoon. And as a result of her coming up and doing this, with many, many media channels here, many more will get to hear her story. But how many people are there like this whose stories have never been told? How many thousands, tens of thousands of men, and in some cases, as with this one, female accomplices, are still living out there, have never, ever been picked up by the police, who've never faced prosecution for something that I think almost represents the most unique evil I've seen in this country in my lifetime. They're out there. I first started trying to get the truth on this issue back in 2012. And of course, for daring to even talk about it, you can imagine the kind of names that I was called. What has become clear is we thought this was happening in 6 or 8 northern towns. Charlie Peters, who has really reignited this story, Charlie Peters doing, I think, great work for GB News. Has shown us that he has evidence that these barbarities have taken place in at least 50 towns. But I'm beginning to hear stories now from Scotland, to hear stories from all over the country, including southern England as well. I don't think any of us have any idea of how widespread this is. I think it is commonly known that these things are still going on. And unless we get to the bottom of what has happened here, to understand the full extent and scale of what has happened here, to understand the motives behind those who perpetrated these crimes, which frankly, I believe are more than likely to be deeply racist in nature. I really do. Unless we confront this head on, we are never going to have a path for stopping it in the future. And yet, all through this, social services ignored what they were told, didn't act on even what the victims themselves said. They frankly weren't believed. The police in many of these towns have acted abominably. I saw today a tweet that was put out from West Yorkshire Police in Bradford in 2017 to say they'd written letters to warn people against crimes of a sexual nature. Letters they should have been interviewing, arresting, charging, and putting people in prison, and they weren't doing the job. And government wasn't in the least bit interested. It's all well and good for Kemi Badenoch now to say there should be an inquiry. She's been in Parliament for 8 years. She has never once in Parliament mentioned this issue, including 2 years from 2022 to 2024 when she was the Minister for Women. They weren't interested. And the Labour Party couldn't deal with it because for them, mass uncontrolled immigration without integration was their multicultural dream. And they can't admit that in some cases it's turned into a disaster. So we've relied on local inquiries. We've relied on the same councils, the same police forces, and the same social workers who covered the thing up in the first place to launch inquiries. And that is why we need a full national inquiry, not, as the Jay report was, into the broader issues of abuse of children. That was a shotgun approach. This needs to be a rifle shot that deals with grooming gangs, predominantly of Pakistani origin, and then preying on young, in most cases, working-class white girls in this country. We need it. We need it now. We need it done quickly. We need it concluded within 9 months, and we then need action across every arm of government in this country. And it would seem that Keir Starmer is dead set against it. putting spurious arguments to Parliament, such as it would take 7 years to conduct an inquiry. That we had an inquiry already, well, we did, but it was 459 pages and only mentioned Rotherham, which we were just discussing, once. I'm pleased that Annie Burnham has broken ranks, whatever his motives. I think the pressure on the Prime Minister is becoming immense, and I have said, and I mean, if by the end of this month the Prime Minister has not called a full national inquiry, then we at Reform UK will raise the money, appoint the people and do it ourselves. We'll do it. Thank you. We've had enough of living in two-tier Britain, had enough of two-tier policing, had enough of two-tier justice, had enough of us all being divided up as to whether we're black, Asian, white, as to what gender we might be, what our sexual preferences are. I mean, I don't want to know. We believe that to live in a country that works, and by the way, this is what we believe in: family, community and country. Aren't they the most important things to all of us, to everybody in the country? No, we're absolutely determined that everybody in this country should be treated equally and judged not on differences between us, but judged on their behaviour. And I tell you what, I think those days of saying, oh, we can't say this, and we can't say that, and oh, we mustn't say things that offend people. I'm quite good at that. And of course, I don't mind in the least if people say things about me. It's called free speech. It's called living in liberty. It's called living in a democracy. And it's what our grandparents and great-grandparents fought 2 wars so that we could have. So we know what we stand for, we know the values we believe in, and we will stand up and fight and defend them. And perhaps one of the advantages is that we're not classic career politicians. Too much of the front benches, and indeed much of the back benches of the 2 parties that have dominated politics in our country since 1918, you know, their ambition from university through research office is to become an MP or to become a minister. Actually, those of us that make up Reform have got some real life experience. There's not a single person on that Labour front bench who's ever worked in private business. Not a single one. So is it any wonder they're making such a haulix of it? Including our Chancellor of the Exchequer, very senior economist from the Bank of England. And well done, Lee. Lee stood up in Prime Minister's questions and called her Rachel from accounts, and that's what she'll be known as forever. And so the economy's in a mess. We're going down the drain. Long-term rates are up, sterling's falling, and for a government that says it's committed to growth, but if you don't understand that the driver of growth is private enterprise, that the driver of growth are men and women setting up their own businesses, working hard, taking risks, and yes, if they succeed, making money. And yet all we do is we tell people at school, you can do a 4-day week. You can work from home. Oh, we're so much more productive working from home, aren't we? Oh, yes, I should Coco. I mean, there's no one left in Whitehall anymore. They're all working from home. We need a complete economic change of culture in this country. We've got to tell young people that actually, no one succeeds in life, in any walk of life, unless they do one thing: dedicate themselves and work damned hard. That is how you get results in life. And let's stop demonizing. Stop demonizing people who succeed and make money and do well. Let's do what the Americans do. Let's cherish those people, because without them paying their taxes, we won't have a national health service. We won't have care for the elderly. We need to make money as a country. But Rachel Reeves, of course, is currently in China. Or should I say, China. More of that later. And I guess going to China and begging the Chinese to buy British government bonds is just one step away from going to the IMF. We believe in encouraging business. We believe the administrative state overburdens everybody. We believe and we know that the cheap importation of foreign labour has, over the last decade and more, driven down the wages of working British people. We want a country in which our brightest and best want to stay, because right now they're leaving. They're going off all over the world: Dubai, Australia, America. We need a change of culture, and I think we, with our business brains, with our experience of life, I tell you what, we could run the country a damn sight better than the Labour Party or the Conservative Party are doing or have done. And some of the political dogma. I mean, can you believe we're even having a debate today? Isn't it great? We didn't have a blackout on Wednesday. How in the 21st century are we even having that conversation? But of course, we paid up to 50 times the market price for electricity for those last-minute gas-fired stations, many of which will be out of commission by 2030. This is the lunacy pursued by the Conservatives and now followed by Labour, and God knows Miliband won't stop until every square yard of land is solar and our seas are all full of wind. Well, as we learn, I'm sure Richard talked about Dunkenflout. You didn't disappoint me, thank goodness for that. We've got another 7 or 8 days of this coming. And we're still importing electricity from Europe. Well, one day they'll need it more than we do. These are the idiots that are leading our country, that have given us expensive electricity, that have given our businesses the most expensive energy in the world, and we're being deindustrialized because of it. We need plain, good, common sense in government, not people following ideology that is failing and will fail and is leading us to economic and social disaster. And I believe reform can do that. We've got the people and we're good enough. Now, it's been this time last year, I was fresh back from the Australian jungle. Thinner and fitter than I'd been since school. 3 weeks without drinking, which I'm doing again, by the way. I'm on dry January. You don't believe me, do you? The papers have said my leadership could be under threat. Maybe this is what does it. I don't know. But I really didn't this time last year think that I'd throw myself back into politics, because I'd done it for such a long time. And I'd done it with one really big goal, which was to take on the establishment over their obsession with us becoming ever more deeply enmeshed in the political project of European Union. And I fought and fought and fought and stood in election after election after election because I thought we should be an independent, self-governing, free nation. And in the end, we did it. In the end, we voted for it. Thank goodness. But I just couldn't, in the end, I just couldn't stand aside. I could not stand aside and watch Brexit be totally botched, watch promises of bringing net migration down to tens of thousands a year, repeated in manifesto after manifesto after manifesto, to end up with net 1 million coming. And to be told, don't worry, they're all coming to work. They're all paying their taxes. And now we learn the last 3 million that came from outside the European Union, only 16% are working. And we're getting poorer as a result of it. I couldn't just stand aside and watch these things happening. So I thought I'd throw my hat back into the ring, which I did on June the 3rd, and that first promise was kept. I said we establish a beachhead in Parliament and get millions of votes, and we did it, and I think the 5 of us are punching way above our weight. I really do. I really do. And that was just the start. But we had to professionalise the party and democratise the party. We've got a new party constitution. The share ownership structure of the party, which I own most of, because I wanted to protect us from infiltration, will be handed over to you, and that's all with the Electoral Commission as I speak. We're building branches all over the country. We're taking on candidates all over the country. We're making sure they're vetted. And by the way, I promise you, we have no room for those motivated by hate. We want decent, good people who want to put Britain first, who want to put the British people first, but do so out of love for their country, their culture, for those people that live here, not out of hatred for anybody else based on religion or whatever else that may be. They're important values. But to take on the big battalions, we've got to go through a series of steps. And the first here in the northwest, and you're lucky, because last night I was in the southeast, Kent, Surrey, Sussex, where all the May the 1st elections have been cancelled. The Conservative administrations in those counties know that reform are coming for them. But they couldn't cancel all the elections, and the county elections are going ahead in Lancashire. And we've been winning. We've been winning some by-elections in Lancashire. I think our prospects are incredibly good. The year after, just over the border, we'll have the elections in Wales, where already we're in second place in the opinion polls and could cause a massive shock. So I want all of you that are here today, if you haven't yet committed to helping, and we can all help in whatever way that is, please, after this meeting, go out to the lobby. There are man tables there, wherever you're from, you know, Lancashire, Merseyside, Cheshire, please go and sign up, please help us. And who knows, there could be a by-election in Runcorn that comes up at some point this year as well. So please engage. And the really exciting thing is, the country is warming to our message. We're told that no one attends public meetings anymore. Well, this one was sold out many times over. And as I speak to you, there are people, huge numbers of people, watching us on live stream, and I bet you were as moved by what Elizabeth had to say as we were. There were many tears in this room, and we do care about these things, and we do care about our country. We do care about our people, and I urge you, if you haven't yet, please join us. And people have been joining us. Now, you've seen the live ticker, haven't you? I can't stop looking at it. I mean, maybe I'm getting old. if I'm thinking about the ticker at 3 o'clock in the morning and the other things, I don't know. But it's quite exciting. Now, who here watched the darts last week? Luke Littler, wasn't that amazing? And what is the top score in darts? And how many members have we got? 180,000 members! Got it. All right, great stuff. There we are. Just before we came on air, live on air, I threw those 3 darts myself. And if you believe that, you'll believe anything. I didn't. To have gone from where we were a year ago, we're about 12, 13, 14,000 members, to 180,000 members says something. And you're all members in this room. And as we move into spring, we will open up our events to the public as well, and there'll be thousands coming to each one of these rallies. But the message is simple. If you agree with us, if you agree with our agenda and what you're trying to do, then please join the People's Army. Help the People's Army. If ever there was a moment, a once-in-a-100-year moment, when British politics was about to fundamentally change, where British politics was about to actually represent what the people of this country really think and feel, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen now. It's going to happen in the course of the next few years. I believe we can do this. I also believe the price of not doing this, frankly, doesn't bear thinking about. We have been led by cowards. We have been led by career politicians. In many cases, we've been led by idiots. We are attempting a political revolution in Britain. If we do it and succeed, we'll leave to our children and grandchildren something worthy and something they can be proud of. And I can't bear the thought of failure. I bet you can't either. So please, let's go forward and let's begin here in the Northwest, in Lancashire, on the 1st of May this year. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you.
So that was Nigel Farage there. He will be with us very shortly we'll discuss his speech and pose some of the questions that you've asked us. But there he is. He's at the Northwest Reform UK conference. We're joining me now, political commentators Claire Muldoon and also Andy Williams. Claire Muldoon, that was Nigel Farage. Did you I kept hearing you say, but how are you going to do it?
Yeah.
How?
Yeah.
How?
Yeah.
So he wouldn't obviously set that up right now. He couldn't set that up possibly on stage.
Well, he doesn't seem to have set it up at all, and that's my issue. And whilst it's great to hear him talk about career politicians, because it's something I've been waning on about for ages, I don't like it. I think if you're a constituent MP, you should know your constituents. You should at least have lived in the area for at least 2 years and got to know the issues that are presenting where your area is that you're representing in the Houses of Parliament. Also, he mentioned the May elections there. I think it's 14 out of 21 local councils might not hold their elections due to the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner's plans to devolve them almost, move some smaller ones with some larger ones. And I think this is a huge issue because we've had quite a lot of local authorities go bankrupt. I mean, how on earth did that happen, for a start? But also, again, the devil is in the detail, and we don't get any detail from Nigel Farage. Whilst it's great, he's very informative, he did it clearly without any notes or anything like that. He roused the Reform Party, he brought in anecdotes of Luke Littler winning the darts, etc. He's basically, he's playing to the audience, and he's playing incredibly well.
Yeah, but what's wrong with that? I mean, you're a leader. Boris Johnson did it.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, Nana.
All the great leaders are great orators, and that's one of the things.
But look at Boris.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's one of the things that you need to garner support.
Absolutely.
Now, if you are wise, you'll surround yourself with advisors who can give you the elements that you don't have. So you'll find yourself a really good chancellor, unlike Rachel Reeves.
Yeah.
You'll find yourself somebody who can deal with business and all those things. There's nothing wrong with you having the gift of charisma, because
absolutely not at all. Absolutely not at all.
Look how bad it is.
Keir Starmer's like a robot, in my view. However, it's again, the devil is in that detail, and without the detail, as we've seen with Boris Johnson, there is nothing but bluster.
All right, Andy Williams.
Well, I couldn't agree with Claire more on that point. There was a bit when Farage said, if you believe that, you'll believe anything, and I think that's the sentence that pretty much sums up his whole career. By the way, on the career politician point, he was first elected 26 years ago, so on and off he's been a politician for a quarter of a century now. I accept he has a hinterland as a... He did, and he...
stock exchange, he worked
very successful. Yeah, absolutely.
That's
but
a bit disingenuous to bring that up, Andy.
No.
I think he's wagging on about the ones that go from good schools to Oxford or Cambridge, read PPE, and then are flown into safe seats from either parties. I know you read PPE.
No, but I totally accept that's a problem, and I do think that the current government would benefit from much more private sector experience. But in terms of the substance of what he said, I'd pick up on a couple of things. Firstly, I think he made a really, really good point about the fact that Kemi Badenoch has suddenly been converted to the cause of calling for an inquiry on grooming gangs. As he said, she was Minister for Women for 2 years. She never mentioned it. She's never brought it up in Parliament. I think the Tories are on a really sticky wicket here because they actually had the opportunity, and, you know, you look at the Alexis J inquiry, which was a national inquiry.
Theresa May.
If you look at that inquiry, none of those recommendations were implemented. The Tories had nearly 2 years to do that. So I think he's got the Tories hugely on the back foot there. I also think he made a really good point. He said the police have acted abominably. And once again, with the entire issue of grooming gangs and this scandal, we have seen the police all over the country fail terribly. I heard one story the other day about a semi-naked girl who was found with 2 or 3 or maybe even more men who were abusing her, semi-naked and drunk, and she was arrested for being drunk and disorderly by the police, not the men who were committing horrible crimes. And I think the police have a huge amount to answer for there as well. So, as always with Farage, I think it's a mixed bag of really interesting and thoughtful and insightful points, and then, as Claire says, bluster.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Look, I mean, he's playing to an audience of people who support him anyway. So they want the energy, they want all of that positivity, they want to hear things are changing. They're not interested right now in the minutiae of the detail as to how it will be done, because, frankly, things will have changed by then. So there literally is no point in
Why is
giving
no
you
one
the
learning lessons, Nana? Look at what happened to the Conservatives. I firmly believe the Conservatives were voted out with any vote. Everyone voted to get the Conservatives out, OK? That is by the by. Then Labour came in with all these, you know, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. None of it's done. I honestly think people are over that now. I honestly think people need something to believe in. They need something, not someone. They need something. And they need policy, and they need a manifesto, and they need to see change.
I think you're wrong. I don't think that anyone would expect anyone to have a manifesto for a potential 5 years down the line. I think what people are really honestly looking for is some positivity, somebody who's speaking their language. So Farage, you know, in terms of immigration, he is speaking their language.
Yes.
Common sense. But these lot, you have the Conservatives who allowed this fiasco to happen. Then you've got the Labour Party who then scrapped Rwanda without even giving it a chance, and they wouldn't have had to take the flak for it being created. And we have heard enough from these two parties. There's been a literally two-horse race for the past few decades, and we're in a mess.
Nana, would you not agree, though, that the Labour Party had 14 years in opposition to come up with solutions?
Of course they had, yes.
Right? So equally, Farage and Reform have got time to come up with solutions.
Well, and I think that's the point. I think at the moment, Reform are an insurgent party. They have 5 MPs. You know, yes, they're very vocal, but it's less than 1% of all of Parliament, right? So they are still, albeit they have 180,000 members, they are still a small party. But they need to make that leap now from being an insurgent party that, as I said earlier, I believe is frankly the Nigel Farage party, into becoming, and I'm not suggesting that they should have a manifesto locked and ready to to go, but they do need to start putting some meat on the bones.
No, they do. Absolutely, they do.
And absolute, look, Nigel Farage, not my cup of tea. I'd never vote for him in a million years. But you cannot deny, best orator in British politics. Starmer couldn't gee a crowd up like that. Kemi Badenoch certainly couldn't gee up a crowd like that. So he has huge strengths, but they need to put the meat on the bones.
Yep.
Well, they will, and in time they will. And he talked about democratising the party, which has to happen, really, and he knows that.
Yeah.
As do everybody. Some of his party and the people who are getting involved as councillors are getting a bit impatient. But the question is, it doesn't happen overnight. You do have to lay the foundation properly and make sure you've done it in the right way. So I have no problem with Reform UK taking time to make sure they are organised properly and that they vet people, and if people don't like it,
that's increasingly.
But he also pointed that out, that he would be making sure that the
well, he had to,
and that's going to be a huge challenge.
Because again, it's public opinion and public trust. He needs to build trust.
But does he sound like, though? Does Reform UK sound like a party that genuinely now want to win the next general election?
I don't know if it's just sound bites, because you can't win an election on one orator, one good orator, one leader of the party. You can't without knowing what the manifesto will be.
But you can, because look, not obviously we don't know the manifesto, we won't know that. But on the strength of one person, I mean, look at Jeremy Corbyn. He was kryptonite to the Labour Party ultimately. And people would not vote for him. So whatever they were saying, no one was listening. They just said, we don't want to...
Well, that was Keir Starmer that let Jeremy Corbyn down. That's the whole problem that the Labour Party have in getting their leaders. They're not easy to get away with, to get rid of Labour leaders, unlike the Conservative Party. It's, 16 letters to the head of the 1922 committee, and job's a good one, you're out.
I know. But I think they're trying to ride on the reputation as being the most savage of parties. But unfortunately, they didn't really know what they stood for, which was a bit unfortunate, really, for them. But listen, if you just tuned in, welcome. Where have you been? You missed Nigel Farage's speech, but he will be joining me in a matter of moments, and I'll put your questions to him. So stay with me. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. I'm Nana Akua, and I'm going to ask him, how is he going to raise money for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal?
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Before she even met Prince Harry, her passion was sharing recipe tips, lifestyle, wellness techniques, because she had a blog, quite a successful blog actually, called The Tig. Of course, that had to be shut down when she became a working member of the royal family. We all know the turmoil that happened with Megxit. Now that her and Harry have come out the other side of that and have signed multi-million-pound deals with Netflix and others, this is the proof in the pudding, pardon the pun, and it is basically, I suspect, the TIG 2.0, because we've got everybody... she has managed to get everybody talking about this. You know, the royal family has been dragged through turmoil over the last few years because partly due to Harry and Meghan's decision, partly due to the royal family's decision, but this is kind of what's come out the other side.
Which is a load of nonsense. I mean, the fact, because it's all totally fake, isn't it? I mean, it's not her house, it's not her kitchen. She clearly doesn't spend her days picking strawberries and collecting honey from bees. I mean, the whole thing's just a fabrication.
Well, it's Netflix fantasy, isn't it? So I think any lifestyle programme such as this tends to not be filmed in the host's house. It's reportedly a $5 million rented house. The cooker itself is worth about $15,000. Even the pans are about $80 as well that she is using. So yes, Stephen, you're right. It is kind of fake and fantasy, but then, of course, that's how these lifestyle programmes are made. It's whether... The question will be, when you watch the series, if you decide to watch the series, is Meghan trying to portray herself as this authentic self, or is she going to make it clear that, you know, this is just like the best bits of her life. But she's got lots of celebrity friends involved in it, including her makeup artists and others as well. Prince Harry makes an appearance.
Mindy Kaling.
Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? No, welcome. This is GB News. We are live. We are Britain's news channel. I'm Nana Akua. Don't forget as well, download the GB News app. You can watch all of the programmes on the channel at your leisure. But it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should we let Shamima Begum back into the UK? Reform UK leader Nigel Farage recently expressed a more thoughtful approach, suggesting that whilst he doesn't view her as an all-out ISIS killer, he's instinctively against her return. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch firmly declared that under her leadership, the UK would never consider bringing Ms Begum back. So what do you think? I'm asking, should we let Shamima Begum back into the UK? Well, joining me now. But this is what, before we do that, let's have a listen to what Nigel had to say about this 6 years ago.
So she's 19 years old. She's a jihadi bride. She clearly, from these comments, is a convinced jihadist. Do we really want her back in this country? But frankly, I think we should take their passports away. I don't think we should let anyone back into this country who is an enemy of all the values that we stand for.
So joining me now, political commentator Claire Maldine and also political commentator Andy Williams. Andy, that was Nigel, 2019, I think that was. Those were his views then. Something's happened, something's changed, I will ask him. But what are your thoughts?
I think what's changed is that, and you saw some of it in his speech a moment ago, Nigel Farage is trying to position reform as on the mainstream right of British politics. And I think you can see over the last few weeks on various issues, he is trying to soften their image, you know, be a bit less, seem less reactionary and position himself against Kemi Badenoch and trying to take a different stance to her on different issues, because let's be honest, he's a much better debater than her, and I think he commands much more popular support than her as an individual. So I think actually this is part of his wider strategy to soften the image of reform. I don't really understand it. I find it odd because it completely conflicts with the comments we saw just there. And as I understand it, Shamima Begum is not a British citizen anymore, so kind of why should she come back to Britain?
But you can change your mind, and maybe he has changed his mind. And also, the popular view is that she shouldn't come back, so this is not a popular thing for him to say. Claire?
No, it's not. And in 2019, it was Sajid Javid that actually removed her British citizenship for good reason.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't know about Shamima Begum had that Sunday Times journalist not found her in that camp.
Well, Andy's actually, that's Andy, I've forgotten his second name now.
And he doesn't think...
He's here tomorrow. So
brilliant. To us and I'm sure he doesn't think that she should be allowed back either. She was born from Bangladeshi citizens, parents who are Bangladeshi citizens. Under any other rule of domicile, she should have been sent back to Bangladesh then.
Andrew Drury.
Andrew, yes.
Yeah.
So I just don't get it. I don't think she should be allowed back in at all. I really, really don't.
Yeah, look, I don't see why she should, because she's not a British citizen anymore.
That's it,
end
of.
It's fair enough that she had her citizenship removed. I have a 15-year-old, though, so on the one hand, I think it's terrible, but my 15-year-old would never have gone off to be an ISIS bride, but there is a level of naivety with somebody.
That's what I think the other side will say.
Naivety with children.
Yeah, and especially with the rape grooming gangs that are the rape gangs at the moment. These children do not have consent, and she was a child. There is no doubt about that. However, she made her mistakes. She's lived by them. She had her British citizenship removed, which is not an easy thing to actually do.
No.
Well, let me read
It's really not. I think there might be more to that.
Let me read you what Andrew Drury actually said about Shamima. He will be here live tomorrow, so make sure you join me then. But he said, I've looked into the eyes of the guys he thinks now we should take back. Pure evil. We haven't got a secure enough prison to keep them in, or the money it would cost. I love Nigel, but he's not thought deep enough about this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what Andrew Drury says, who has met Shamima and has spoken to her, and looked in the eyes of these people, and he says, "Nah, I wouldn't bring them back."
So perhaps the other, as I understand it, Seb Gorka, who's one of Donald Trump's advisors, he has said that ISIS members who are US citizens who are based in Syria should come back to the United States, should be allowed to come back to the United States. Now, they're US citizens, so that makes sense. But the other thing I wonder is, well, is this another attempt by Nigel Farage to curry favour with the Trump administration? Maybe that is what's lying behind this, because we know that Farage is desperate on every issue to align himself with Trump.
Bottom line, she's not a British citizen. That's it.
But maybe, again, as I said before, that maybe the grooming gang scandal, the rape gang scandal, has made him have a think about that positioning, and actually maybe he's thinking, sorry, let me finish. Maybe that she was groomed.
Well, they might do, and I said that, but they might also paint her as a victim because of her 3 children dying young, which, as a mother, it must be horrific to have gone through that as well. But at the end of the day, the facts are the facts. What are they going to do? Bring her back and let her apply to be a British citizen again after all the hoo-ha? If I was her, I wouldn't want to return.
Well, she obviously realises her situation in Syria is not a great one, because obviously in Syria it's not as cushy as a life here in the UK, but she has burnt that bridge.
She has, no, I completely agree. I'm, to be honest, I'm surprised this is even up for debate, really. I thought this discussion was closed.
Yep.
You know, her citizenship was removed, and that was that.
That's the thing, isn't it? Because then people do question what is the motive for Nigel to say that. But again, I think perhaps he's looked at the grooming gang scandal and just thought, maybe she was groomed, and that's what a lot of people may be thinking as well. I know Maggie Oliver was quite concerned as well on that side. But what do you think? GBNews.com/your say. We would love to hear your thoughts. Keep all your thoughts coming. I will be reading those throughout. In a few moments' time, Nigel Farage will be here live on GB News, and we'll get his thoughts and his comments, and bring me your questions. GBNews.com/your say, and I will ask him. But this is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Will Hollis.
Thank you, Nana. As you were just hearing, Nigel Farage has repeated a pledge that Reform UK will pay for an inquiry into the grooming scandal if the government continues to reject calls. Speaking at the party's North West Conference in Chester, Reform's leader said the abuse of children in towns across Britain, predominantly by men of Pakistani heritage, was the most unique evil in his lifetime. He used his speech to criticise both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, while renewing calls for a national inquiry into the grooming scandal. He also praised GB News' investigation into the abuse.
What has become clear is we thought this was happening in 6 or 8 northern towns. Charlie Peters, who has really reignited this story, Charlie Peters doing, I think, great work for GB News. Has shown us that he has evidence that these barbarities have taken place in at least 50 towns.
Well, it comes as 10 Reform councillors in Derbyshire leave the party over the leadership of Nigel Farage. Meanwhile, the Health Secretary has warned the use of inflammatory language over grooming gangs risks vilifying entire communities. He also says he fears rhetoric could lead to atrocities similar to the Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand, which killed more than 50 people. Wes Streeting told The Guardian newspaper, "There are people in my community who have either Pakistani heritage or look different, who are now more fearful today than they were before." A new story for you now. Ukraine says its troops have taken 2 North Korean soldiers prisoner in the Kursk region. Writing on X earlier today, President Volodymyr Zelensky said the wounded men who are fighting alongside Russian forces are being treated and transported to Kyiv. Some 10,000 North Koreans are believed to be supporting Putin's army in the defence of Russia after Ukraine's surprise incursion into its territory earlier this year. Temperatures dropped to minus 18.7 degrees in the UK's coldest January night for 15 years last night. The Met Office says the temperature was recorded in the most northern region of the Highlands. Much of the UK endured below freezing temperatures overnight, dropping to minus 11 in Shap and Cumbria, with Heathrow recording minus 5 degrees Celsius. Football matches have been postponed today as the cold snap plays havoc with fixtures. A migrant has died while trying to cross the Channel from France to the UK. More than 30 people were rescued after a boat got into difficulty overnight. The migrant from Syria was reportedly crushed by others on board the leaky dinghy. A government spokesperson who confirmed the death said the tragedy underlines the terrible dangers of small boat crossings. Those are your latest headlines. We'll have more for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather updates provided by the Met Office. It's quite a misty weekend out there for some of us. Some freezing fog patches lingering in places because we've got high pressure in charge across much of the UK today, and that is providing light winds and therefore very good conditions for those fog patches to just persist right throughout the day. Even into this forthcoming night, they will start to reform, become denser, particularly through the Vale of York down towards East Anglia. Northern Ireland also expecting some quite widespread fog overnight. This cloud in the middle will provide some patchy outbreaks of drizzle in places, and that could cause some icy stretches where it's falling on frozen surfaces, because particularly in the east we are expecting another widespread frost to be developing here. But as we start off Sunday morning, there is going to be a noticeable west to east split in conditions. Whilst it certainly is going to be very chilly off towards the east, we've got some slightly milder air pushing into the west, so parts of Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland, temperatures actually starting on the positive side of the temperature scale. Certainly is, though, worth remembering that those fog patches will be around first thing in the morning, so if you are travelling, do remember to take care. They will slowly lift and clear as we head throughout the day, probably quickest in the northwest, because this is where we're going to start to see the winds picking up in strength later on in the day. Gales perhaps developing across the Outer Hebrides into the afternoon and evening as we see patchy outbreaks of rain moving in here. Generally a calmer day for England and Wales. That high pressure is still in charge, but it will provide some sunshine once the fog eventually does clear off. But temperatures struggling here for 5 degrees Celsius at best. But the mild air in the northwest is slowly going to push its way across more areas of the UK as we head over the next few days or so. So into the new working week, things are generally settling down for the most part. There will be some rain around at times, but certainly some sunny spells in there. But a noticeable shift in those temperatures, certainly by midweek, much more pleasant for many of us, I think. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's fast approaching 37 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. I'm Nana Akua. Well, let's get some of your reaction then to Nigel Farage, Reform UK's leader. Let's see what you guys have been saying. This is a lady of the house. She says that at age 15, I was at work paying taxes, not sewing people into suicide vests or sweeping up their heads. Apologies for that if anyone's offended, but these are things that apparently Shamima Begum has observed or potentially participated in, or sewing up heads of beheaded people. She was never a child. She was a monster growing up into an evil... into somebody who's quite evil. She must never come back here. Now, that obviously, apologies if anyone's sensitive to that, but that is a view, that's their perspective, and the things that she has pointed out were things that apparently Shamima Begum had been involved in, which is one of the reasons why she lost her citizenship in this country. I mean, what do you make to that comment, Andy?
Well, look, I mean, obviously her behaviour is completely indefensible. There is no sensible, sane, rational person would say, oh, you know, poor old Shamima Begum. I mean, I agree with Claire about that, you know, she was very, very young when all this happened, but most, you know, sane, feeling, rational people would never put themselves in the situation she's put herself in. And I'm afraid that her, you know, where she is now, which is without her UK citizenship in Syria, in a very difficult situation, is of her own making.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about this one then? So, this one, oh, Nana, you're looking lovely in the red dress, thank you. Michelle.
I agree with that one.
Thank you very much.
Vision in
It is
orange.
orange, by the way, but that's cool. Thank you very much, Michelle. I shall take that as a mega compliment. But Michelle also says, I love Nigel and I normally agree with him, or he normally agrees with me. But where Begum is concerned, he's wrong. She should not be allowed back to the UK. She can rot over there. Just secure our borders.
Well, I mean, I don't think Shamima Begum taking her back would, you know, put the prism of our borders at risk. But, you know, I am very much of the case that, no, that's it. She's not a British citizen. She's not our problem. From 2019, she's not our problem.
I would say, I think that's a really interesting comment because we've seen over a separate issue 10 reform councillors resigning and saying, as Elon Musk has said, Farage isn't the right person to lead the party. Well, will comments like this make other reform members maybe think, oh,
well,
is he the right man?
I suppose. Well, look, this is one for you. Sharon says, William's blathering on and on about wanting detail and getting Farage...
That's what Claire said, that wasn't me.
Both of them, actually, but she's targeted you.
OK, yeah. Blathering again, yeah.
Farage to put meat on the bones. Next breath, he says he wouldn't vote for Farage in a million years if he has no clue or detail of what Farage stands for. What's he basing the sweeping statement on? Progressive lefty, obviously brainwashed.
It's a fair question. Well, firstly, I think progressive is a compliment, but there we are. I'm basing it on Nigel Farage's entire political career, and unless there is an enormous change to his outlook, his approach and his politics, that doesn't align with mine. But who knows? Maybe there is an alternative universe in which I'm going to vote reform in the next election. I can't see it.
Well, that's probably what I thought when I voted for Tony Blair. And then, obviously, the alternative universe occurred whilst he was in power, and then I went off and voted Conservative. But now what you've just said, I feel that about the Conservatives, you see, and so, again, it goes on.
Do you know what? I think one of the best things about reform is that they're challenging the two-party institution and narrative in this country. Forget Scotland at the moment, because that's still in the cuckold of the SNP, unfortunately. But then it's definitely rivalling, and it's definitely waking people up. And who would have thought that reform would have been known as woke because they're wakening people up? So there we go. I think that's a really positive thing that they are doing. And I think they're going to get quite a lot of the young votes.
Yeah, well, see, Sir Keir Starmer wanted to open up the electoral voting system to 16 and 17-year-olds, so you could vote from the age of 16.
Which is wrong in my view.
Because I think in his head, he thought that the youth would vote for him. I agree, I'm with you, I don't think they should be voting. No. But then, on the same breath, we think that Shamima Begum is old enough, you see what I mean, to know her own mind and be...
I don't think she knew her own mind then. The difficulty with the Shamima Begum debate is the fact that she actually went and did it. She carried that through. Whether or not she was coerced, whether or not she was controlled, I don't know. No one knows. Only she knows. And there's never been any defence given in from her that she was.
And the reason we're talking about it is because that is an incredibly extreme situation.
Yes.
Like, we don't know of anybody else in Britain who has gone off and done the same. Maybe they have.
And maybe
but
they
we don't know of anybody else. So it's an incredibly rare and extreme thing to have done.
Well, Angela says, why should we, Angela Hughes, thank you for your message on your say. She says, why should we show her any humanity when she paid little care and sympathy to all those victims her ideology killed? Which makes a good point. Charles says, as I've said earlier, I want to see those who groomed children like Bagan brought to task. Yeah, up to now, many have been untouchable. I agree. I mean, again, somebody pointing out that maybe she, in a way, she must have been groomed in some respect, but then there's a piece where you have free will. And at that point, when you're 15, you've got a lot of that.
Agree.
If you're 12, that's different because your free will can be easily, it's very malleable and can easily be coerced into doing things. But when you get to 15, 16, you're firming up your own stance, your own position, your own beliefs, and at this point, you know right from wrong.
And there's a difference between being impressionable and going to join ISIS. I mean, this is just an extraordinary leap to make, an extraordinary decision to make.
We'll keep them coming. gbnews.com/your say. We are Britain's news channel. Stay tuned, loads more still to come. Plus, I will get the latest reaction from Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. I'm expecting to hear from him any minute now. But first, let's have an update with your travel.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
For anyone looking for winter sun, I can report very mixed conditions across the Med. Unsettled in Italy with showers in Greece, but across much of Iberia it's fine. Plenty of sunny skies, breezy towards the Canaries. And we've got this area of low pressure moving through Italy. That's going to bring unseasonably windy weather and outbreaks of rain with snow over the mountains. Meanwhile, showery conditions and a strong wind, but mild for Greece for the time of year. And then it turns more settled widely across the Med next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Well, so things are apparently hotting up a little bit. I mean, it's been very, very cold. Stay with me, though, because in a matter of moments, Nigel Farage will be joining me. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we're going to introduce you to Liam Wildish. Liam, well, I'd like to think he's a friend of mine because I follow him on Instagram, on TikTok there as well.
You're a big fan, aren't you?
Big fan, because there's what he does. He's a cleaner. He cleans signs. But the thing is, he's not employed by councils or whatever. He does this voluntarily. And you sort of think to yourself, well, who cleans these signs? Why have these signs been allowed to get into this terrible state of disrepair and filthiness?
So basically, long story short, about 6 years ago, I used to be a window cleaner. In the community where I lived, I noticed all of the road signs were filthy, and I was perfectly equipped to clean them. So basically, I cleaned the road signs as a bit of a thank you to the community and sort of make a little bit of awareness of my window cleaning business at the time. Yeah. Sort of cleans up the area, makes the road safer, and that's kind of how that started. And people found it like a really satisfying sort of approach. So that sort of led on to today of a video in cleaning the dirty road signs and making sort of satisfying content with it as well.
What is the equipment? What have we got here?
So this is a water-fed pole system connected to a backpack, which is what feeds the water through the end of the brush there. It's perfectly equipped to basically remove this green dirty, it's like a mildew build-up that you get on the signs. Yeah. As you can see, this is like extremely effective at removing so.
So GB News viewers, if they spot a particularly grisly sign in their area, then they can get in touch.
They can do, yeah.
And Liam Wildish, the sign guy, can sort you out.
If you find Liam, the sign guy, online, drop me a message, let me know, and I'll add you to my list of places.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, 47 minutes after 4 o'clock. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. And lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. I shall read one of them. This one came on my email. This is from Francis. Francis says, it made me chuckle. It said, so glad you've put your hair back to its natural colour, black. You may have liked having it blonde, but in our opinion, it looked awful. He said, I'm an accomplished journalist presenter and having that hair diminished our respect for you. So they've been avoiding the programmes and they said, glad to be able to watch you again. Well, I was so glad as well. I thought I had to share that because that was just actually quite funny. But listen, 48 minutes after 4. I'm glad I hope you would like it as well. I think I prefer it this colour too, but it's time now for the Great British Debate this out. And I'm asking, should there be a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal? Now, former Children's Minister Tim Loughton has warned Labour's key plan to tackle grooming gangs will backfire, saying a proposed law requiring mandatory reporting of child abuse could overwhelm police with vexatious allegations. So, that is the problem. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should there be a national inquiry into the grooming scandal? Well, joining me now, political commentator Claire Muldoon and also political commentator Andy Williams. Yeah, I don't get, Claire Muldoon, I don't understand what Sir Keir Starmer would be afraid of, to have a national inquiry that would join all the dots and not just come up with ways how this could be prevented, but actually call those people to account who participated in this in a negative manner.
I really don't understand it either. I really don't. I find it quite patronising that they're not open and willing to open up another inquiry. If it's a cost thing, I mean, it shouldn't be. What cost of those young girls who have been abused and raped and their bodies vilified, their minds vilified too? What cost do they have? What retribution do they have? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And for those 111 MPs that voted, yes, let's have an inquiry. Let's hear you. Let's hear you try and turn. Let's hear you try and turn the 324 that voted against it.
It was shocking.
Absolutely
that all of
shocking.
the Labour Party voted against this. Now, I that is unusual for anything anyway, but for them all to
they
decide
must have been
that,
whipped
they've
for
obviously
it.
been.
Well, that's because it was an amendment to a bill.
Yeah, but still, for them all to vote against this amendment, all of them, not even a few of them maybe saying, oh, I'm not doing it, I'm not going to say anything, that doesn't look right to me.
Well, look, that's a completely separate issue, which is around that, of course, Labour MPs are not going to vote against a government bill. And this was an amendment to a government bill, and they were backing the Labour Party position. So it's not, it's kind of
Andy
slightly
Burnham's not.
Sorry?
Andy Burnham's
but Andy
not.
Burnham's not an MP. And also Andy Burnham, as always, has an agenda, which is it's the Andy Burnham show. Andy Burnham wants to be leader of the Labour Party one day.
No, I don't know whether that's true. I don't know whether that's
is.
true, because he had an option and an opportunity to do that, and he didn't. He preferred to stay in Manchester and look after the people in his local area. So I don't think that's a fair comment to make, because he's had plenty of opportunity to go for the leadership.
Well, that's my view on Andy Burnham. I think he very likely, when he's done another term in Greater Manchester, will want to come back to Westminster and lead the Labour Party. But that's not the important point here. On the inquiry itself, I'm not against there being another national inquiry, but there has already been one. It took 7 years, cost £200 million, and there were 20 recommendations made. And none of them were implemented by the Tories. They had just under 2 years. They did nothing.
All right,
they sat on it and they did nothing. And I expect they did nothing, not because they don't care about these girls, because I'm sure they do.
They were too busy infighting.
They were too busy infighting, and I reckon they balked at the cost of the compensation that was recommended, which would be between £5 and £10 billion.
OK, so let's talk about this, the Alexis J inquiry, because that's the one you're referring to. OK, so it was quite toothless, because you couldn't force people like the police or councillors or anyone to speak. So even though you say we've had an inquiry and the recommendations were not specific to those particular instances, so in Oldham, they weren't specific. So it was toothless, they weren't specific, and the recommendations, we could put those in place, but it still does not tackle the people who have been affected negatively by the scandal. And it also doesn't look at the national problem. Our own reporter, Charlie Peters, has identified about 50 locations in this country where this is potentially still going on.
Yeah, and
we need to look into all of that.
So, as I said, so I'm not against the inquiry. I just don't think that is the priority. I think the number one priority is we have a report which you say is toothless but is comprehensive, took a very long time.
How can it be comprehensive if you cannot get police to speak, you cannot get the councillors to speak, and a lot of these people were actually involved in it. So it's toothless.
We've had other inquiries, you know, we have had 10 inquiries now. So actually, while it might be unsatisfactory that you have several inquiries, and maybe there should have just been one.
There should have just been one.
Absolutely, so mistakes were made in the past. But is it the priority for us to have another inquiry? Or should we take the many, many facts we have at our disposal and start to actually affect change and make progress?
So what if you were one of the victims? Would you be satisfied with what you've just said?
Oh, well, I can't even...
No, I'm asking you specifically. If you were one of the victims there and they said, that we're not going to have a national inquiry, we're just going to use the bits and pieces that we've got from inquiries that really were toothless, and we're going to use that to try and fix the problem, would you, as a victim, be happy with that?
I can't even imagine how awful it would be.
But try and imagine. Imagine that you've been through something awful like this and somebody said, we're not really going to look into it thoroughly. We'll take the inquiry that was really toothless, where we couldn't really speak to your abusers or the councillors or the police. Would you be happy with it?
I don't know, but that's not how we should make government policy. I'm afraid.
I'm asking you personally. Would you be happy with that?
I'm telling you I don't know, and I'm also telling you that I don't think, I'm afraid, we should make policy on the basis of emotion.
I'm not saying you're making policy on the basis of emotion. I'm just saying I'm appealing to your emotion and asking you whether you yourself personally would be happy with the answer that you've just given me. And I don't think you would be.
I don't know.
I don't think you would be.
Look, I am sick to the back teeth of politicians on all sides making these victims political. They're kicking the abuse that's been there so many times. I want it to stop. I want an inquiry. I want to understand why it happened, and I want the perpetrators held.
All right, well, so the government spokesperson from the Home Office issued the following statement. No child should ever suffer sexual abuse or exploitation, and it is paramount we do more to protect vulnerable children, which is why we're working at pace across the government to drive forward real action. Well, you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Stay with us. So I'll be joined by our relentless reporter, Charlie Peters, who'll give us the latest story that has shamed Britain.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers. Sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather updates provided by the Met Office. It's quite a misty weekend out there for some of us. Some freezing fog patches lingering in places because we've got high pressure in charge across much of the UK today, and that is providing light winds and therefore very good conditions for those fog patches to just persist right throughout the day. Even into this forthcoming night, they will start to reform, become denser, particularly through the Vale of York down towards East Anglia. Northern Ireland also expecting some quite widespread fog overnight. This cloud in the middle will provide some patchy outbreaks of drizzle in places, and that could cause some icy stretches where it's falling on frozen surfaces, because particularly in the east we are expecting another widespread frost to be developing here. But as we start off Sunday morning, there is going to be a noticeable west to east split in conditions. Whilst it certainly is going to be very chilly off towards the east, we've got some slightly milder air pushing into the west, so parts of Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland, temperatures actually starting on the positive side of the temperature scale. It certainly is, though, worth remembering that those fog patches will be around first thing in the morning, so if you are travelling, do remember to take care. They will slowly lift and clear as we head throughout the day, probably quickest in the northwest, because this is where we're going to start to see the winds picking up in strength later on in the day. Gales perhaps developing across the Outer Hebrides into the afternoon and evening as we see patchy outbreaks of rain moving in here. Generally a calmer day for England and Wales. That high pressure is still in charge, but it will provide some sunshine once the fog eventually does clear off. But temperatures struggling here for 5 degrees Celsius at best. But the mild air in the northwest is slowly going to push its way across more areas of the UK as we head over the next few days or so. So into the new working week, things are generally settling down for the most part. There will be some rain around at times, but certainly some sunny spells in there. But a noticeable shift in those temperatures, certainly by midweek, much more pleasant for many of us, I think. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever. An incredible £50,000. That's tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this year. What would you spend it on? £50,000 could buy those treats you've always dreamed of having. And just one entry into the Great British Giveaway really could make £50,000 cash all yours. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Should we talk about the weather?
Yes.
Because apparently, all of this weather is leading to bunk-off Monday, Dawn.
Yeah, this is the front page of the Daily Star, which is a very attractive picture of a potato on a couch. So everyone...
We haven't done enough of that over the last...
Everyone working from home today, hope you're having a nice time, because we're obviously not. Yeah, so sickies will double today. Bunk-off Monday. Millions of workers call in ill to avoid the snow. Now, obviously, for many people, it's the first day back after the Christmas and New Year break as well. Many people have had 2 weeks off. And the weather gives you a bit of an excuse to maybe extend that break. Now, look, don't get me wrong, up in the north it is terribly bad, and we had airports shut at the weekend, football games being potentially called off, etc., and it was awful. However, in many parts of the country, certainly in London and the South East, it's just rain. There's just puddles out there, people.
There's no excuse.
Just go to work.
Down here.
And the security guy said he can't work from home. He can't work from home. He's got to come in, isn't he?
Well, there are so many. It does tend to be the working class jobs as well, the ones that you can't do from home. The people running the supermarkets, the people running the NHS, the people, the postmen, the dustbin people. I mean, all these people are the ones that have to get out there no matter what the weather and get on with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's all these, and we had stories over the other day, didn't we, about people working from home from a beach in Ibiza.
Exactly.
From Barbados. People working for local councils.
Yeah, I've got a few friends in corporate jobs today who've got the week off work.
Oh, dears.
And if you're affected by the weather over the week?
No, not at all. Well, yes. My golf was cancelled yesterday.
Oh, my God! How did you...
Snowfall, my golf was cancelled, a mighty woe, but couldn't get it out there. Oh, can you believe it?
What? Honestly,
no.
How did you...
Love them. My grandkids love the weather.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon and welcome. It's just coming up to 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me for the next hour, political commentator Claire Muldoon and also political commentator Andy Williams. Coming up, Rachel Reeves says there's no choice but to engage with China, and she seeks to restart Britain's formal economic relationship with the nation.
Overall, this government's re-engagement with China already sets us on course to deliver up to £1 billion of value for the UK economy.
So I'm asking, should Rachel Reeves be in China whilst the pound plummets? I've got a poll up. It is live on the GB News website. Head over there and cast your vote. Now, Nigel Farage spoke live from Reform UK's conference. Let's have a listen.
Had enough of living in two-tier Britain. Had enough of two-tier policing. Had enough of two-tier justice. Had enough of us all being divided up.
Well, all this comes as 10 Reform councillors have resigned in a bid to get Nigel Farage to stand down as the party's leader. and I'll be bringing you the latest story ahead in very shortly because, of course, Charlie Peters will be here. It is the grooming gang scandal, and Charlie Peters has got a fabulous documentary which will air tonight at 8 o'clock. He'll be joining me in a matter of minutes. And in difficult conversations, Khadija Khan, a Pakistani activist who has accused Sir Keir Starmer of silencing the whole debate on grooming gangs, will also be joining me. But before we get started, let's get your latest news with Will Hollis.
Nana, thank you. Nigel Farage has repeated a pledge that Reform UK will pay for an inquiry into the grooming scandal if the government continues to reject calls. Speaking at the party's conference in the North West in Chester, Reform's leader said the abuse of children in towns across Britain, predominantly by men of Pakistani heritage, was the most unique evil in his lifetime. It comes as 10 Reform councillors leave the party over the leadership of Nigel Farage. Well, he used his speech to criticise both the Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition while renewing calls for a national inquiry into the grooming scandal.
What has become clear is we thought this was happening in 6 or 8 northern towns. Charlie Peters, who has really reignited this story, Charlie Peters doing, I think, great work for GBNews. Has shown us that he has evidence that these barbarities have taken place in at least 50 towns.
Meanwhile, the Health Secretary has warned the use of inflammatory language over grooming gangs risks vilifying entire communities. He also says he fears rhetoric could lead to atrocities similar to the Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand, which killed more than 50 people. Wes Streeting told The Guardian newspaper, "There are people in my community who have either Pakistani heritage or look different, who are now more fearful today than they were before." In other news, Ukraine says its troops have taken 2 North Korean soldiers prisoner in the Kursk region. Writing on social media platform X, President Volodymyr Zelensky said the wounded men who are fighting alongside Russian forces are being treated and transported to Kyiv. Some 10,000 North Koreans are believed to be supporting Putin's armies in defense of Russia after Ukraine's surprise incursion into its territory earlier this year. A migrant has died while trying to cross the Channel from France to the UK. More than 30 people were rescued after a boat got into difficulty overnight. The migrant from Syria was reportedly crushed by others on board a leaky dinghy. A government spokesperson who confirmed the death said the tragedy underlines the terrible dangers of small boat crossings. Chancellor Rachel Reeves says there's no choice but to engage with China as she seeks to restart Britain's formal economic relationship with the nation. The Liberal Democrats have urged the Chancellor to return to the UK immediately and announce a serious plan for growth. But Reeves says agreements reached with China today are worth £600 million to the UK over the next 5 years.
Overall, this government's re-engagement with China already sets us on course to deliver up to £1 billion of value for the UK economy. This includes across our financial services, in which the UK is a global leader. Financial services are the engine which power prosperity and growth through deep and liquid capital markets. Our 2 countries share great pre-existing links in this area as the highlight of our bilateral economic relationship.
Authorities in Los Angeles have declared a local health emergency for the whole county due to poor air quality as fire and smoke has blanketed the area. 11 people have now died and over 10,000 homes and businesses have been destroyed. California's governor has called for an independent investigation into how critical fire hydrants ran out of water and became impaired. Back to the UK now, and temperatures dropped to minus 18.7 degrees in the UK's coldest January night for 15 years last night. The Met Office says the temperature was recorded in the most northern regions of the Highlands. Much of the UK endured below freezing temperatures overnight, dropping to -11 in Shap and Cumbria, with Heathrow recording -5 degrees Celsius. Across the UK, football matches have been postponed today as the cold snap plays havoc with fixtures. Those are your latest headlines for now, but I'll be back a little bit later. For now, it's Nana.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, welcome. This is GB News. It is fast approaching 8 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, we'll be bringing you the latest on the story that has shamed the nation, the grooming gang scandal. GB News' relentless reporter Charlie Peters joins me ahead of his documentary airing tonight. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do we need a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal? And in the last hour, Nigel Farage has once again called for this and has suggested that Reform UK will fund the inquiry if the government fails to do so. And in difficult conversations, I'll be speaking to Khadija Khan, a Pakistani activist who has accused Sir Keir Starmer of silencing the whole debate on grooming gangs. And, of course, as ever, my quickfire quiz. You won't want to miss that. Send me your thoughts, post your comments at gbnews.com/your say. So the Health Secretary has warned that the use of inflammatory language over grooming gangs risks vilifying entire communities. He also says that he fears the rhetoric could lead to atrocities such as the Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand, which killed more than 50 people. Now, this comes as the former Children's Minister Tim Loughton warns that Labour's plan to tackle grooming gangs will backfire, that a proposed law requiring mandatory reporting of child abuse could overwhelm the police with vexatious allegations. Well, joining me now is our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, so we're looking forward to watching your documentary at 8 o'clock tonight. What does it lay out? What are we looking at? What are we expecting in it?
Well, it's a years-long investigation into this scandal on a nationwide level, because we've known about this issue across the country for many years, really since around 2010, when it first reached kind of national prominence. But we've only really ever had local reports, local reviews, the reviews into Rotherham, Rochdale and Telford, and one also in Oldham, though that's been disparaged quite heavily by the survivors there. No one's ever looked at this at a national level, and that's really what GB News set out to do, to join the dots and to look at this issue beyond those local reviews and do our own investigation to see just how bad this problem was. And what we found, Nana, is that it was truly a national atrocity. It wasn't just a handful of towns in the north and the Midlands. This was an issue all the way from Bristol, Banbury, Buckinghamshire, up to Glasgow, via Newcastle, via the northwest, throughout the country and the Midlands, of course, where many towns have not had reports. All over the United Kingdom, we found this as a big issue. And when we put forward our findings that some 50 different towns and cities had been experiencing the scourge of grooming gangs, it did affect some change. The then Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, launched a national grooming gangs task force. It made over 550 arrests in its first year, protected 4,000 victims, but still not enough was done. We felt at the Channel especially that more work could be done on this. And we were shown, did we not, by the task force and all the arrests and all the protection and all the support it made, that we just don't know enough. We haven't looked into all the historical and ongoing crises, and that's why, as part of this investigation, we've heard so many calls for a national inquiry, so that the people who have learnt the truth in Rotherham can also learn the truth about Birmingham, about Bradford, about Newcastle, about Barrow in Cumbria. That's a really key area as well. All over the country, we've had this crisis, but only in a few places we've had an investigation. That's what GB News has set out to achieve, and we're seeing the political fallout from that now.
See, now, Jess Phillips, she said that she would listen to victims, but it turns out that she hadn't really really spoken to any to find out. Now, why would she not be able to get hold of these people?
But Nana, I think this is the key part of what we revealed exclusively last Wednesday, when this whole story kicked off and the focus returned to the grooming gang scandal. We showed that the government had rejected that request, a survivor-led request in Oldham for a government-led inquiry into the grooming gang scandal there. We showed also that Jess Phillips had made that decision over 3.5 months after the request had been made. She'd missed the first letter. I know she missed it, but she didn't respond to it. 2 letters were sent.
Oh, wow.
And we could show that that delay had taken place. Why did it take so long? But we didn't know how much conversation she'd had with Oldham survivors. The ones in the town had told me they hadn't spoken to her before she made the decision, but there are so many survivors in Oldham, I couldn't be sure who she'd spoken to. But she admitted this week, openly in an interview, that she had not yet spoken to a single Oldham survivor. Yesterday, another broadcaster spoke to some other survivors saying that that was really disappointing, that they hadn't been spoken to before Jess Phillips made this decision, and that their voices weren't included in the previous review. That's why they wanted this government-led inquiry, to make sure everyone was heard and to compel people to give evidence. Jess Phillips has a lot of questions to answer on this point. But I think, Nana, as you've seen over the last week, so much of the focus on Jess Phillips has been about Elon Musk and the tweets he sent. Very few people have actually been pushing that question. And unfortunately, we've yet to been able to interview her on this, or anyone from the Home Office, despite GB News breaking the story that led to this sudden surge in interest.
What would be the reason, though, for them not to want a national inquiry? Because to me, it doesn't make sense. I know it'll cost money, but then, so what? Everything costs money.
Right.
So what is the reason? Have you been given any specific reason as to why they're not doing this?
Labour keep referring to the fact that there have previously been local reports, such as the one in Telford, which was led by a barrister, published in 2022. It found some 1,000 victims and survivors in that town over a handful of decades.
Wow.
A really shocking number. But the problem we've got with those local inquiries, Nana, is that they take so long to get off the ground. There's often political opposition to them, because why on earth would a local area vote for itself to be investigated if it would expose failures, possible corruption, possible collusion between gangs and the police, as we've seen in Rotherham, for example? We've seen some really appalling failures, not just ignorance and a lack of investigation, worse than that, corruption, collusion, links between public servants and rapists. That's astonishing. So it's no shock that so often when these things happen, people in power say we don't want to have a look in them. So I think that's potentially why we've had this
Although
resistance.
Oldham Council actually asked for a national inquiry.
That's right. They've asked for that government-led inquiry because the councillors voted for it, because the survivors demanded it. But here's the key point, Anna. They only voted for it after 6 attempts to have a motion on it were voted down, because Labour were in power in Oldham. They lost overall control in May of last year, and this motion was passed in July. As soon as they lost control, the first thing I did was speak to survivors in Oldham, and they told me that they were then confident that it would happen. We revealed last July that it was going to get off the ground. But let's go away from Oldham. Another concern that we have with these local reviews in Greater Manchester more generally is that the people who run them and look into them can't compel people to give evidence. So in July, we also revealed at GB News that the 2 men leading the investigation in Greater Manchester, as organised by Andy Burnham, had resigned, and sources told GB News that they'd done so because they were unable to get information out of Greater Manchester Police. We were told that they were blocked from accessing survivors, from accessing accounts and information, and that legal teams were being brought in to hamper their work. OK, now, at a government level, that just can't happen. OK, when it's a government intervention, there are way more powers. You can bypass those attempts to block you, and you can compel people to give evidence, and they have to swear on oath about what has happened. There's local reviews. Many survivors say people just don't need to come forward, and the truth can be averted.
Is this still going on?
Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. First and foremost, because of the reports that we've gathered over several years across the country, 50 different towns and cities. They're not all historical cases. Many of them are modern cases. We've seen people being convicted a couple of days ago in Dundee at Glasgow High Court. That's another town we now have to add to our list. OK, this list grows every week. We're looking at this and refreshing it. But also we've seen 4,000 victims protected, Nana, in 1 year of this task force operating. There's no doubt in my mind that more survivors need that protection, not just historically, but right here in Britain today.
All right, well, listen, Charlie, really looking forward to watching the documentary. Thank you very much for joining us. That is Charlie Beaters, GB News' brilliant reporter. And later tonight, 8 o'clock, don't miss it on this issue.
Tonight at 8 p.m, tune in to a GB News Investigates documentary as we tell the full story of the grooming gang scandal.
My childhood has been stolen.
We will expose the cover-ups that have kept this national scandal under wraps for decades.
Not one person has been held accountable.
Our investigation uncovers the true scale of this outrage.
I want to see senior officials held legally to account.
On GB News, grooming gangs, Britain's shame.
Yeah, don't miss that tonight at 8 o'clock. Now, a government spokesperson from the Home Office issued the following statement. No child should ever suffer sexual abuse or exploitation, and it is paramount that we do more to protect vulnerable children, which is why we are working at pace across government to drive forward real action. Well, stay with me, because next in the interview with a journalist, commentator and activist Khadija Khan, who joins me for Difficult Conversations.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
TikTok chefs, Instagram chefs, that they put children off or young people off of cooking because it's so expertly done they can't do it. No, my young lad, he's 17, he is amazing in the kitchen.
Is he?
Oh, he is. He's amazing in the kitchen. And he gets it all off TikTok. He comes down, he can put burgers, wraps, stews, curries, sauces, and the smells in the kitchen. I said, where'd you get these? Oh, just TikTok, I'm trying it out. And it's just amazing the things that he can conjure up. So for some people, it might be... it's an inspiration for him. So they're saying that it's intimidation. For my boy, it's an inspiration. They say it's entertainment. For my boy, it's an infomercial. I watch him doing his stuff. At that stage, I could do baked beans on toast and knock up a salad. That was it. But my boy can do all sorts of stuff.
It makes it accessible as well, doesn't it? Because lots of people say, like, you need an education to be in the kitchen, or you need to go find yourself loads of cookbooks. But you don't.
No.
You can go on your phone now.
Well, I mean, like, all the spices, sesame oil. I mean, I'm amazed at the stuff that he does. So it's encouraging. All you just need is a kitchen well-stocked and have a go. And understand that failure is actually the route to learning. I mean, he's made mistakes, he's stuck stuff in the bin, but that young man, I am amazed at some of the stuff he does.
I don't mind cooking at all. It's cleaning up that I have the problem with. Dawn, let's talk about sex.
Can I just say there are things called restaurants, by the way? Just put that one. Like hell, I don't even know where the kitchen is.
OK.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 21 minutes after 5 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? No, I'm glad to have your company. I'm glad you're here now. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. It's time now for difficult conversations. And joining me today is journalist and commentator Khadija Khan, who has bravely spoken out about the gender inequality and societal issues rooted in conservative cultural practices, drawing from her own experiences growing up in a deeply patriarchal environment in Pakistan. Khadija has a unique perspective on the intersection of misogyny, cultural traditions and the challenges of addressing these issues in a Western context. And all of this comes following the shocking grooming gang scandal involving predominantly Pakistani men, and accuses authorities of failing to address the cultural roots of these crimes out of fear of causing offence. And Charlie Peters has an exclusive tonight on GB News. Right now, though, joining me in the studio, journalist and commentator Khadija Khan. Khadija, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Such a pleasure to meet you, finally. Now, talk to me about how, you know, your as you grew up, because you grew up in a very religious household. It was very conservative, and obviously it was Islam was the religion in Pakistan. Talk to me about that.
Islam is a state religion in Pakistan. Then, of course, the culture of Pakistan stems from that religious discourse. It was patriarchal. It was very much unjust towards women. Prejudice towards women is a common occurrence in that society, where women are not treated as equal to men. And as growing up, as a girl growing up in that environment, I was very much aware of my position, because, to be very honest, it takes brainwashing, you know, from a very early age, when they tell you how to behave, how to speak, how to conduct yourself in the presence of other people, and especially in the presence of family, men from the family, and those men who are not from the family, are from outside of the family. So that all of these things, they just make that environment very suffocating for a little girl. But I was very fortunate to have a mother who was very much strong in her, I would say, resolve. And she wanted to protect her girls, you know, from these kind of things, because she herself suffered, you know, from these kind of traditions and rituals and all that. So she wanted to protect us, and she did protect us. And I still suffered a lot, despite that fact that she was there to protect me, still suffered, because it was not about the mother I was living with. It was the family, and then the society, the community, the schools, the madrasa I would go to. So it was very hard to, you know, protect yourself from all those discrimination, you know, which was very much common in a patriarchal society such as Pakistan.
So give me an example, then, of what kind of thing would make you feel that they were prioritising the men ahead of the women or the girls. Give us an example.
The basic element comes from the religious discourse, where it has been very much clear that women are not equal to men in many respects. Men are head of the family, and women are there to serve them. Wife is there to serve her husband and please him, and she has no authority or no autonomy is the better word to say. She has no autonomy, and she is there to serve that man. And then the whole family is serving those men of the family. The concept of disciplining wives by beating is very much, you know, a part of that religious discourse. So that can be translated into, you know, different transgressions, the different way of, you know, violating women's dignity. It's not always beating. It's always not, you know, using some tool to put her in her place, as they say. It can be verbally, you know, it can be you know, verbal expression. It can be, you know, in a very obvious manner. They can just tell you that you cannot be treated as equal as any other man in the society.
Now, you had brothers, didn't you?
Yes, I have one.
How did that make you feel towards your brothers?
To be very honest, when I was growing up in that environment, so I just internalized, that misogyny that was coming from religion, because it was the word of God that cannot be challenged. So that was my fate, to be, inferior to my own brother. So that was my place. So I internalized most of my life that, whole concept.
How did he take it? Did he sort of go along with it and really, did he sort of grow with it? Or did he kind of look on you and think, this isn't right? Did you get a sense that he felt it wasn't quite fair?
I think it's very obvious outcome of that environment when you are raising men, young boys with that mindset. They also internalize, they accept it as it is, and they take it as a divine law and their position as an ordained right to be, in that position. So for him, it was also a very usual thing not to protest that why I am being treated any better than my own sisters. So I think it's all about how they brainwash kids, how the children are indoctrinated into thinking, in such societal roles, in such religiously conservative societies.
So you left Pakistan.
Yeah.
Why did you leave there? Was it because of this?
To be very honest, I was not very comfortable with that environment. I was a journalist and I wanted to write about things, these questions that were in my mind. I wanted to, manifest them in my words, in my actions. But I was unable to do that. So for me, when I get the opportunity, that was the best thing to do, to get out of that environment, because it was suffocating. And I don't say it because I felt that suffocation. There is suffocation in such societies where the religious edicts and religious beliefs are used to dictate each and every moment of your life and put you in your place, as they say, and denigrate you. And they tell you that your position in the society is not any better than, a subhuman.
So when you hear about the grooming gang scandal, does that come as this sort of behaviour? And they were predominantly, I think, British Pakistani males. So whether they were born here or they became British when they were here, does that surprise you that this sort of thing was going on, or is probably still going on?
The medieval outlook that I have just discussed, that is not only about Pakistan. This mindset does exist and persist here in the UK, across the country. I mean, this is something that is coming from religious discourse. So conservative Muslim society, the pockets of conservative, Muslim communities, and in particular Pakistani society, they have a very particular mind about Western women. I, as a growing up, young girl in Pakistan, I used to hear these kind of comments that Western women are immoral, they are promiscuous, and they are not, decent, they have no values, they have no moral compass, they don't know how to raise a family, they don't want to have kids, they want to just spend their whole life. These kind of stereotypes, they were perpetuated in that patriarchal society. And when the victims of grooming gangs, they talk about the things that those abusers would say to them or call them, the terms. I don't want to say those things because they are so offensive, but it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all, because I know, I have heard these kind of things. They use these kind of things and terms to brainwash women into believing that if you would ever try to dress up like a Western woman, act like a Western woman, then you would end up, being a corrupt, vulgar woman. So we want to protect you. So that's the correlation. That's the relation between that society and here, the mindset in the abuser's mindset I see. And I think the problem here is that people, I've been listening to, West Streeting comments about like it can just incite violence. This is rhetoric. These are excuses. Many Pakistani people I know here in the UK, they are appalled at the scale of this abuse, and they want perpetrator to be brought to justice. But the thing is, people who are talking, nobody is listening to them. They want to talk to or get engaged with the most conservative section of the Muslim communities, who take every criticism as an attack on Islam and on their culture and religious belief. We know that, especially Pakistani women here in the UK, when they want to talk about talk about violence against women here in the UK, they are told to shut up. They are told to be quiet, not only by the religious, zealots, but also from the liberal French. Nobody wants to listen to them. Then they say there is a deafening silence here in Pakistani community, because all they want to get engaged is with the most conservative pockets of the Pakistani community.
So really, because obviously most people from Pakistan are wonderful, most men from Pakistan are wonderful, but you're saying that basically the government seemed to hear the voice of the most conservative element of the Pakistani community, rather than actually realising that the general Pakistani community certainly don't behave like that and don't think like that in any way, but it is something that is inbuilt within the religion and the way they are brought up, not here, but across many communities, that then fosters this mindset towards women, which is quite negative. I hear you.
Nana, I just want to mention that here on the GB News, I was in a discussion with a Muslim woman who was wearing hijab. And when I said that as a child, I wanted to be free and I didn't want to wear hijab, I was told that just because you wanted to be free, that doesn't mean that you want to expose yourself. So that is the mindset, that if you don't want to wear hijab, if you don't want to cover yourself, actually you are exposing yourself. So exactly.
Inbuilt kind of almost.
Exactly. So the girls who are wearing skirts, shorts, and jeans and crop top, so they are seen as exposing themselves. And the family, some of the family of the abusers, the women, they said it, that these girls are to be blamed, because they seduced. They were not acting in a decent way. So this kind of mindset, it does exist and persist, and we need to condemn it. We need to call it out, because I always mention it is not harming only the women outside of the community. It is also impacting the women within the community, the victim of misogyny and patriarchy, which is very much prevalent, within the certain section of the Muslim community.
Khadija Khan, such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for talking to us, and I think it does help and give a greater understanding of the mindset of many within those communities. Thank you so much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is a journalist and broadcaster Khadija Khan. Right, a government spokesperson from the Home Office issued the following statement: no child should ever suffer sexual abuse or exploitation, and it is paramount we do more to protect vulnerable children, which is why we're working at pace across government to drive forward real action. Right, 33 minutes after 5 o'clock. If you just tuned in, welcome. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Still to come, the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should there be a national inquiry into the grooming scandal? But first, let's get your latest news with Will Hollis.
Nana, thank you. Your top stories at this hour. Nigel Farage has repeated a pledge that Reform UK will pay for an inquiry into the grooming scandal if the government continues to reject calls. Speaking at the party's North West conference in Chester, Reform's leader said the abuse of children in towns across Britain, predominantly by men of Pakistani heritage, was the most unique evil of his lifetime. He used his speech to criticise both the Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition, while renewing calls for a national inquiry into the grooming scandal. He also praised GB News' investigations into the abuse.
What has become clear is we thought this was happening in 6 or 8 northern towns. Charlie Peters, who has really reignited this story, Charlie Peters doing, I think, great work for GB News, has shown us that he has evidence that these barbarities have taken place in at least 50 towns.
Well, it comes as 10 Reform councillors in Derbyshire leave the party over the leadership of Nigel Farage. Meanwhile, the Health Secretary has warned the use of inflammatory language over grooming gangs risks vilifying entire communities. He also says he fears rhetoric could lead to atrocities similar to the Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand, which killed more than 50 people. Wes Streeting told the Guardian newspaper, "There are people in my community who have either Pakistani heritage or look different, who are now more fearful today than they were before." In other news, Ukraine says its troops have taken 2 North Korean soldiers prisoner in the Kursk region. Writing on social media platform X, President Volodymyr Zelensky said the wounded men who are fighting alongside Russian forces are being treated and transported to Kyiv, where journalists will be able to speak with them. Back here, a migrant has died while trying to cross the Channel from France to the UK. More than 30 people were rescued after a boat got into difficulty overnight. The migrant from Syria was reportedly crushed by others on board the leaky dinghy. A government spokesperson who confirmed the death said the tragedy underlines the terrible dangers of small boat crossings. And finally, temperatures dropped to minus 18.7 degrees in the UK's coldest January night for 15 years last night. The Met Office says the temperature was recorded in the most northern region of the Highlands. Much of the UK endured below freezing temperatures overnight, dropping to minus 11 in Shap and Cumbria, with Heathrow recording minus 5 degrees. Football matches have been postponed today as the cold snap plays havoc with the fixtures. Well, those are your latest stories. I'll be back at 6 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather updates provided by the Met Office. It's quite a misty weekend out there for some of us. Some freezing fog patches lingering in places because we've got high pressure in charge across much of the UK today, and that is providing light winds and therefore very good conditions for those fog patches to just persist right throughout the day. Even into this forthcoming night, they will start to reform, become denser, particularly through the Vale of York down towards East Anglia. Northern Ireland also expecting some quite widespread fog overnight. This cloud in the middle will provide some patchy outbreaks of drizzle in places, and that could cause some icy stretches where it's falling on frozen surfaces, because particularly in the east we are expecting another widespread frost to be developing here. But as we start off Sunday morning, there is going to be a noticeable west to east split in conditions. Whilst it certainly is going to be very chilly off towards the east, we've got some slightly milder air pushing into the west, so parts of Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland, temperatures actually starting on the positive side of the temperature scale. It certainly is, though, worth remembering that those fog patches will be around first thing in the morning, so if you are travelling, do remember to take care. They will slowly lift and clear as we head throughout the day, probably quickest in the northwest, because this is where we're going to start to see the winds picking up in strength later on in the day. Gales perhaps developing across the Outer Hebrides into the afternoon and evening as we see patchy outbreaks of rain moving in here. Generally a calmer day for England and Wales, that high pressure still in charge, but it will provide some sunshine once the fog eventually does clear off. But temperatures struggling here for 5 degrees Celsius at best. But the mild air in the northwest is slowly going to push its way across more areas of the UK as we head over the next few days or so. So into the new working week, things are generally settling down for the most part. There will be some rain around at times, but certainly some sunny spells in there. But a noticeable shift in those temperatures, certainly by midweek, much more pleasant for many of us, I think. Bye-bye.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel. This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
It's just coming up to 41 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. First I've got to say, I'm sorry, but unfortunately we haven't managed to get Nigel for interview because he went straight off in his car and didn't, unfortunately, do the interview. I don't think he was frightened of me. I don't think so.
He's run away.
Maybe after last week.
Yeah.
He thought, I'm not going to let that
Yeah,
woman...
but do you know what? The question is he in a Tesla?
Is he in a Tesla? Yeah. No, because it'll be a very slow move if he is in one of those, probably out of charge. But listen, yeah, so apologies, but I'll try and get him back here tomorrow. All right, on the channel soon, so stay with us, but huge apologies. But it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should there be a national inquiry into the grooming scandal? Former Children's Minister Tim Loughton has warned that Labour's key plan to tackle grooming will backfire, saying a proposed law requiring mandatory reporting of child abuse could overwhelm police with vexatious allegations. Well, it's a bit like what happened with, what's his name? Hamza Yusuf, or Useless, with his plan, wasn't it? He had some sort of plan, hate crime, non-crime hates and things. And in the end, the police were overwhelmed because, unfortunately, they all complained about him. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should there be a national inquiry into the grooming scandal? Well, joining me now, political commentators Claire Muldoon and Andy Williams. Claire Muldoon, I'll come to you. We mentioned the national inquiry. I think we can carry on from there. Do you think we need to do it?
We definitely do need to do it. The scope for the J report was far too high in terms of what the Alexis J covered. It took, 7 years to come out with her report? And you know what? In the end, she said her conclusion, the nation has been scarred by an epidemic that has left thousands of victims in its poisonous wake. Nothing has been enacted since Theresa May had the report commissioned. Nothing has been done about it. But I think that report in itself, in its essence, must be the basis for a new inquiry, a new public inquiry, which, not forgetting 4 out of people in this country polled actually wants to do. And we cannot forget, we must not forget the victims that are caught up in all of this rape, gang, grooming culture. It's abhorrent. And as the wonderful Charlie, GB's Charlie Peters has already said, they're looking now at Glasgow. They're looking at new cities, new towns, all up and down the country. People at quite a high level, I think, must have been complicit, at least in their knowledge of what was going on. And we, as the public, have got a right to know. But moreover, before what we think, what we want, it's the victims I feel for, and their families, and the children born from rape.
What do you think of Khadija's comments with regard to West Streeting? Now, Khadija was making the point that this is another sort of attempt to kind of silence people once again, to say, oh, don't say anything because otherwise we'll end up with a mass shooting like what happened in New Zealand, when actually many in the Pakistani communities want the inquiries. They want these wicked people to be exposed. And obviously this is a very conservative, extreme element, but it's not the main community. What do you think of that?
Well, I think one of the most shocking things about this whole scandal is that we know from the inquiries that have already taken place, and there have been 10 of various different scope, we know for a fact that some councils, local councils, didn't intervene, didn't do enough for fear of looking racist. And that is a huge problem. And you're completely right, Nana, to say that this is not something that would apply to or even enter the minds of the vast majority of people of Pakistani heritage. But we know for a fact that almost all of the perpetrators were of Pakistani heritage, and we need to get to the bottom of why that was. There is one thing that I just want to...
Well, I think Khadija made a point that there's some sort of inherent, almost indoctrination in the, that, even when she was growing up, the man is very misogynistic and it's very, some people make it patriarchal, and some people will take this to an extreme.
Yeah, and I think that, unfortunately, that is the case in certain conservative, small c conservative elements of society of all different, you know, backgrounds and races. I do just want to nail one point which I think has bordered on misinformation in the last week or so, which is the idea that there was a sort of complete cover-up, a conspiracy of silence in the mainstream media. You know, The Times in particular and a number of other newspapers have been reporting on this and throwing huge resources at this for years and years and years. And I just want to say that Nigel Farage, when he was speaking earlier, he said, I've been talking about this since 2012. Well, The Times in 2011 ran a headline that said, revealed conspiracy of silence on UK sex gangs, subheading most convicted offenders of Pakistani heritage. The Times have been talking about this 14 years.
You just contradicted your whole self there, because you've just said that even The Times are reporting there's a conspiracy of silence. So even they have acknowledged that nobody really wants to talk about it. So in saying that you're trying to say that nobody's been talking about it, but then you've pointed out a piece that The Times put in there that pointed out that nobody's been talking about it. And actually, if they had all been talking about it, this would have been far bigger and we'd be dealing with it. So there are a few pockets of the media that were doing it, but somehow they never really surfaced, and that is a problem that needs to be tackled. Right, later tonight at 8 o'clock, you won't want to miss Charlie Peters' brilliant documentary on this issue. Have a listen.
Tonight at 8 p.m, tune in to a GB News Investigates documentary as we tell the full story of the grooming gang scandal.
My childhood has been stolen.
We will expose the cover-ups that have kept this national scandal under wraps for decades.
Not one person has been held accountable.
Our investigation uncovers the true scale of this outrage.
I want to see senior officials held legally to account.
On GB News, grooming gangs, Britain's shame.
Now, that's somebody I would give a damehood to, isn't it? Maggie Oliver, Sadiq Khan. Anyway, a government spokesperson from the Home Office issued the following statement. No child should ever suffer sexual abuse or exploitation, and it is paramount we do more to protect vulnerable children, which is why we are working at pace across the government to drive forward real action. Well, stay with me, because coming up, as ever, my weekly quickfire quiz, I test the panel on some of the other stories that have hit the headlines this week.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Look, if people want to do veganuary, that's all well and good, but it shouldn't be forced on people, should it? Or even strongly suggested by something like the NHS?
It's not being forced on anybody. People can choose in the Wirral or any other NH trust that gets involved whether they want to partake or not. What they're doing are promoting the benefits of a vegan diet. Now, you imagine you're the NHS trust. You've got one person dying every 3 minutes from heart disease, and vegans get much less high blood pressure, much less heart disease than do meat eaters. So surely, if your job is to promote health, then you should let people know these kind of stats. Vegans get less cancer. Red meat is a class 1 carcinogen, classed by the World Health Organization as processed meat definitely causes cancer of the bowel. So it's just letting people know what the health advantages are of reducing or taking meat completely out of your diet and becoming vegan. You get less diabetes type 2, which is a big problem in the UK, less deaths from stroke, and around 1/5 less of all cancers. Imagine it was drugs that had that kind of impact. People would be hailing it and going, wow, this is amazing.
To call it about diversity and inclusion, I just think that's a load of nonsense. This is
is a move away by public bodies from this compulsory veganism. Look, your speaker from Viva, which is a very hardline animal rights organisation, attempts to talk about the environment and other issues, but really this to them is about animal rights. They don't believe in a world where we should use animals. I completely disagree with the speaker. I respect her right to say that, of course, but I completely disagree. And that's why the NHS and public bodies just shouldn't be getting involved in things that are so controversial.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, it's time now for our quick-fire quiz, the part of the show where I test my panel on some of the other stories that are hitting the headlines. Joining me now, political commentator Claire Muldoon. Your buzzer, please, Claire. And also Andy Williams. Your buzzer, please. Please play along at home. Right, let's do it. Question 1. What percentage of people stick to their New Year's resolution? Is it A, 11%, B, 6%, or C, 2%? Andy Williams.
6.
That is B, Claire.
What's the 6, 2 or what?
Choose on there. Choose one.
Oh, I can't see.
6, 2 or 11?
Oh, gosh. 2.
2. Did you say 2?
6.
All right, let's see. The answer is actually 6. Yes, most people giving up in actual February. So that's interesting, isn't it? Right, question 2. True or false? The proportion of 25 to 34-year-olds still living with their parents has increased by more than a third in the last 20 years. True or false?
True.
Andy Williams?
I think it's probably true as well.
No, say false just in case, man.
False just in case.
Too late, I have to take your first answer. The answer is it is true.
Yes.
High rent costs and rising house prices have caused this spike. Yes, of course, and some of them have realised it's very nice at home, isn't it? It's a lot cheaper. You can do a lot more stuff at home. Right, question 3. Closest answer wins. It's the FA Cup third round this weekend, but what year did the football competition start? Andy Williams.
1874.
Well, I'm Scottish, I wouldn't know.
You need to press the button. Say anything, man.
FA doesn't apply to me, I'm Scottish.
Well, the closest answer wins, so just to come up with one. Any year.
1954.
Right, I hope somebody's doing the maths here. I think you're way off, though. It's 1871.
3 years away.
Yeah, well done.
Bad.
That's 2.
Still wrong, though.
No. Can you have that?
Still wrong.
It's the closest answer wins. He wins that.
Yeah,
It's actually 1871. It's the oldest football competition in the world. Question 4. This is an open question. Why did world chess #1 Magnus Carlsen quit a recent major tournament? Andy Williams.
He wasn't allowed to wear jeans.
Claire Muldoon.
He wasn't allowed to wear jeans. Checkmate.
Oh, let's see if you're right. He was told he couldn't wear jeans. Andy, obviously that's for you, Claire. Answered it after impossible. So it doesn't matter. You can copy him all you like. First one to the right answer gets it. All right, question 5, last one, multiple choice. The world's oldest woman died this week. But what age was she? Was she A, 120, B... I've started, so I'll finish. I haven't finished the question. Unfortunately, you'll be disqualified.
You did finish the question. You're not giving the answers.
No. You've got to... That is part of the question. A, 120, B, 122, or C, 116. Andy Williams.
116.
OK, and Claire Muldoon, you've already buzzed.
120.
120, she says. The answer is... It's C, 116. Japanese woman Tomiko Ituka was 116 years old, actually the same age as my great-great-grandmother.
Amazing.
That's incredible.
And I am named after her, Nana Akua Amoatima.
That's fantastic, Nana.
My great-great-grandmother, who died at 116.
Amazing.
Isn't it just...
Do you want that longevity?
I do. In fact, if there was a pill that I could take to live forever,
really?
I'd absolutely gobble it down. I'd take 3 of them. Would you?
I don't know about forever.
All right, well, listen, what do you think at home? Anyway, today I've been asking, should Rachel Reeves be in China whilst the pound plummets? And according to our Twitter poll, 4% of you say yes, 96% of you say no. I've got to say a huge thank you to my panel, political commentator Claire Muldoon, thank you very much, and also the political commentator Andy Williams, and a huge thank you to you at home for your company. It's been a pleasure as ever. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. The Saturday 5 is up next, and don't forget, Charlie Peters, 8 p.m. Be there or be square. I'll leave you with the weather.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather updates provided by the Met Office. It's quite a misty weekend out there for some of us. Some freezing fog patches lingering in places because we've got high pressure in charge across much of the UK today, and that is providing light winds and therefore very good conditions for those fog patches to just persist right throughout the day. Even into this forthcoming night, they will start to reform, become denser, particularly through the Vale of York down towards East Anglia. Northern Ireland also expecting some quite widespread fog overnight. This cloud in the middle will provide some patchy outbreaks of drizzle in places, and that could cause some icy stretches where it's falling on frozen surfaces, because particularly in the east we are expecting another widespread frost to be developing here. But as we start off Sunday morning, there is going to be a noticeable west to east split in conditions. Whilst it certainly is going to be very chilly off towards the east, we've got some slightly milder air pushing into the west, so parts of Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland, temperatures actually starting on the positive side of the temperature scale. It certainly is, though, worth remembering that those fog patches will be around first thing in the morning, so if you are travelling, do remember to take care. They will slowly lift and clear as we head throughout the day, probably quickest in the northwest, because this is where we're going to start to see the winds picking up in strength later on in the day. Gales perhaps developing across the Outer Hebrides into the afternoon and evening as we see patchy outbreaks of rain moving in here. Generally a calmer day for England and Wales. That high pressure is still in charge, but it will provide some sunshine once the fog eventually does clear off. But temperatures struggling here for 5 degrees Celsius at best. But the mild air in the northwest is slowly going to push its way across more areas of the UK as we head over the next few days or so. So into the new working week, things are generally settling